Hello.
Yo.
Hello.
You seem so excited.
Yeah, can't wait to talk about this this thing I'm going to listen to.
This. Let's generously call it an album, I guess.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm the lead singer for Lipstick.
And I'm Steve. I'm the bassist for Lipstick.
And welcome to the Lipstick panel. Today on the Lipstick panel, we are talking about the Kiss album Carnival of Souls, the band's answer to grunge and Metallica's Black Album. Was it a success or a miserable failure? Unlike most episodes that we do, where we usually have a bunch of Kiss nerds talking about how great Kiss is and blowing the band, we have a couple of metal experts joining us on the program to see if this album meets the cut for them. We've got fan favorites of the show, Joseph DeGolyer and Kaleb Schweiss, returning to the program. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Great to be here. Talking about this particular album.
Yeah, so this album, Kiss Carnival of Souls, The Final Sessions, is the last album recorded in the non-makeup era of the band. So before the reunion, this was going to be the band's, next album. It was supposedly supposed to be shipped platinum, and the metrics for sales on the album from record industry analysts was supposedly pretty high. So this was going to be a comeback album, supposed to be a big album in the 90s, but then they realized we will make way more money if we reunite with the original dudes and shelve this. But the album got leaked onto the internet by a certain member of the Kiss camp who shall remain unnamed, but if you have an in, you know exactly who did it and why he was bitter and leaked it onto the internet.
So literally it's a coin toss, isn't it?
Yes, it's literally a coin toss. Like, which of these two dudes who was still in the band at the time was pissed off that all of his hard work wasn't heard by the masses and leaked the album so that the record company would be forced to release it and he would get paid some more cash?
That shitheel Ken Tamplin.
Hey, he loves Jesus quite a bit.
I have no idea who Ken Tamplin is. I just picked a random name that had a single credit on the album.
Oh, he's a Christian metal singer and a really fantastic vocal coach who gives great YouTube tutorials.
Ooh, he's won 4 GMA Dove Awards.
Yeah. But so this is easily the most divisive album in the Kiss catalog. For some, it's one of the band's best and a brilliant masterpiece, and for some, it is a miserable failure and a giant piece of shit. Normally, with the show, we go around the panel and talk about our history with the band and the album at hand.
So let's do that.
Yeah, so let's do that. Joe and Kaleb, you just heard this album very recently, but what is your prior experience with Kiss before this episode?
Well, I'll tell you, like most people, Kiss is primarily in my mind of the band that sings the mediocre rock and roll song, I Want to Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day.
You mean the rock and roll national anthem, sir?
Yeah, and he's
Yeah, just because it's a national anthem doesn't mean it's good.
Look,
that's true.
It's been a long
it's
time
no
since I
Canada.
rock and rolled. There's we built this city on rock and roll, and I gotta tell you, it just goes right in the middle there as far as songs about rock and roll that are not interesting to me whatsoever.
ACDC
However,
is a long way to the top. If you want to rock and roll, is amazing though.
no, it's still in that category. So,
Yourself.
Rock and Roll High School? Can we agree on Rock and Roll High School is what should be the actual national anthem of rock?
Rock and Roll High School is great, but it's the anthem of the high school, not of all of rock and roll. And also, Caleb's right, that song is fantastic also.
it's better than I Want to Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day. Now, so I've heard that song a lot. A lot of times I think when it plays on the radio, it plays the live version of that song. But then getting to know you guys through these podcasts, knowing how huge of Kiss fans you were, I looked up Kiss a few months ago, and I found out that a lot of songs I knew were actually Kiss songs that I had No idea that they were Kiss. Like Lick It Up, and I Was Made for Loving You, and a few others as well that I can't think of at the top of my head. So, with those songs in mind, yeah, I like Kiss. And I listened to their first album a few months ago, and I thought it was pretty good. And then I've listened to this album the other day, and I don't think it's that great. So that's where I am on Alice and Kiss. I mean, Kiss. Sorry.
Caleb, how about you?
Well, it's very similar to Joe's experience with Kiss. All I knew of Kiss was I Want to Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day, and Detroit Rock City. I'm pretty sure that was like Kiss, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember parts of that movie, and that's it for Kiss. Like, I knew Kiss was one of those bands that had, like, they have their radio hits, and then they have their actual music, which isn't really, like, close to what the radio hits are. It's one of those groups that, like, the big hardcore fans are like, well, I mean, nobody really likes I Want to Rock and Roll All Night. I mean, it's like Metallica fans were like, well, and someone tells you they like Metallica, and they're like, oh yeah, I love Fuel, and you're like, it's fun, but you don't like Metallica if you like Fuel. If that's the one that comes to mind.
Enter
first.
Sandman, bro.
No Leaf Clover.
The both better. Well, I don't know about No Leaf Clover. I would say both better songs, and both also more like Metallica-y than Load, or than Fuel, right? So that's
I like
kinda
Fuel
how
better
I
than
view
those
Kiss, and
songs.
it's always been something where I'm like, one of these days I should give them a shot, because I really only know like 2 Kiss songs, and
Now you know like 14.
yeah, now I know 16 after this. And it's always just been a band that's kind of there, and I understand that they're like important, but it's always funny because it's the band that like they're all masked up and they look really intense, but then they're like not at all intense. It's like the softest rock you can possibly imagine, and they got these crazy ass makeups on and like huge stage presence, and it's not that. Like, it's crazy. It's such a misleading group to me, and maybe it's less misleading than I know, but I Want to Rock and Roll All Night, seeing them all dressed up in their fucking studded belts and painted faces and like long tongues sticking out. I'm like, I feel like you guys should have been born 20 years later, and you would have been perfect. Like, you would have been so perfect for that. Like, and you would have been like a metal band, but they're not to me. They're definitely a rock band. So like, it's this weird thing that exists that I have yet to really dabble into. And that's kind of my experience with the band. This is the first album by Kiss that I've listened to all the way through, and I recognized one of the songs, but it was a song that Greg told me to listen to before doing this, and I had feelings about it, and I'll share those feelings as the episode goes on. But Kiss to me is just, it's just a big act that I've never really gotten into, but I know, like Joe said, I know there are Kiss songs that I know, but I don't know they're Kiss, because they're one of those bands that, like, they just have such a kind of a dynamic sound, and they change it up from the big ass song that everybody knows. So
Change it up! Change it up!
yeah. So I didn't know that was Kiss either. So here we are.
I found out that was Kiss, and I was like, oh shit, no, I like Kiss.
I think so. The trick with Kiss is that there are multiple vocalists. So Joe, interestingly, he leans towards the Paul Stanley songs, because the songs you mentioned you liked, those are all Paul songs, and Rock and Roll All Night is a Gene song.
Oh, now see, I thought those were all the same guy. I had no idea.
I recognize that. It wasn't until like half a dozen or so episodes into listening to every single Kiss song ever that I finally started to be able to recognize their different voices.
So, Steve, since you're the resident Kiss expert on this panel, who has listened to most of the catalog at this point,
true.
And also the one who has the most expertise with grunge and alt rock. You are the
Most
qualified person to talk about this album. So why don't you go next?
So I'm trying to picture the world in which Kiss showed up 20 or 25 years later as a metal band, and it's occurring to me that in order for it to really work, for them to be the big phenomenon that they always intended to be, they would have to be a new metal band.
Yeah, it would be Mushroom Head, Slipknot, and Kiss.
Yeah, that would be super weird.
You know what's weird? I see a bunch of like European metal festivals where that bill is a thing.
Yeah, and like, wow, what's the name? What's the dude from Limp Bizkit? Zach Weiland? He would end up being like the replacement guitarist for Kiss after their original guitarist did too many drugs. That's totally the wrong name. Why am I spacing on his name?
I don't remember his name either, but yeah,
this
that
makes
guy.
me sad because like Limp Bizkit didn't deserve him.
So aside from a Limp Bizkit
Wes
guitarist,
Borland, that's it. Yeah.
Yes, Wes
Sorry
Borland.
for forgetting your name, Wes. But yeah, he would very well fit in Kiss. They probably should have recruited him in the late 90s anyway. Although this album was 97, Limp Bizkit started in like 98, so never mind.
and also this album came out a few years after it was recorded.
Yeah. So
97, this came out during the reunion era as like a, hey, let's just shove this out there.
So anyway, longtime listeners of this podcast probably know that I usually only listen to a Kiss album once. For this particular episode, last week, Greg sat me down and made me listen to Speedball Jam by Vinnie Vincent, just Vinnie Vincent, and it melted my brain. And I forgot what our recording schedule was, so I proceeded to go to work the next day with his copy of Carnival of Souls and listen to it and review it and hate it, and then sent him my rankings, and then I realized it wasn't until a week later that we were actually recording it because of my melted brain. So then I listened to it again today and still did not enjoy it. This is not a good album. Sort of the fundamental flaw with it is that, like, so people accuse I Was Made for Loving You of being like Kiss selling out, that suddenly they were chasing trends and they were doing a disco album. But I Was Made for Loving You is the only disco song on that album, whereas this is an entire album of trend chasing bullshit where they're like, I guess grunge is big now, that's what we're doing. And it's not good. They need to do their own thing and not try to be Alice in Chains.
Yeah,
I mean, Alice in Chains was trying to be them.
I don't think so, but yeah.
Early Alice in Chains, when they were still a hair band,
Right,
was
when they're
trying
called
much more
Alice
to be Kiss.
in Chains with a Z.
Alice in Chains.
Man, the fact that so many of those grunge bands started off as really shitty hair bands is always hilarious to me.
And turned into great grunge bands.
Yeah, sure. So, listeners of the show know that I'm a big Kiss fan.
And not a big grunge fan.
Not a big grunge fan. I first saw the band in 2004 Rock the Nation tour, and I grew up listening to grunge bands on the radio and thought that music was terrible. I hated grunge for many, many years. I still don't really like it. And when I was going through the catalog, I eventually picked up this CD. I actually got in a 3-pack at the local CD store.
That's a great sign.
3 copies of Carnival of Souls for the price of 1.
It was with Aerosmith's Done With Mirrors, which was their kind of ill-fated pre-comeback album. And there was also the Whitesnake album Saints and Sinners, which has the original version of Here I Go Again, which has the line, like a hobo I was born to walk alone instead of like a drifter. The original bluesy version of that song, and Carnival of Souls. And
I know that.
I freaking love this CD. It is in my top 5 Kiss albums. And we actually have a clip from a guest who couldn't be here who wants to comment on my stance on this album. So before I get more into my thoughts on it, I'm going to play a clip from our good friend Mike Walsh, who couldn't be here today.
Take it away, Crazy Crazy Mike.
Hi guys, Mike Walsh here. I want to thank you for allowing me to send this in, even though I can't be there with you in person on today's Carnival of Souls podcast. I will say right away that it is like one of my bottom 2 Kiss albums, but there is some really cool stuff on there, and I was looking forward to discussing it with you guys. I'll keep this simple and get right to it. My main reason for wanting to send this over is to let everyone know, the guys on the panel right now and all of the listeners in the future, what a terrible person Greg Troyan is. Because Greg, you consider Music from the Elder and Carnival of Souls to be your two favorite Kiss albums, and I find that to be infuriating. And I'll start by saying that yes, Crazy Nights is my favorite Kiss album, and I love Asylum, I love Hot in the Shade, I love other 80s albums by the band. I love a lot of albums by the band that a lot of fans and 70s purists and whatnot would also kind of dismiss and be like, whoa. So, in that little sense, Greg, you and I do have a commonality. However, here's why I'm awesome and you suck. Because an album like Crazy Nights, for example, definitely has a different sound than 70s Kiss, but I very much stand by the fact that in many ways, if not most or always, it still maintains the ethos that is Kiss. The fun, the anthemic energy, the sexuality, the Believe in Yourself songs, it's all still intact. Your two favorite Kiss albums are the two albums that are the far most removed from what Kiss is about. And an even more infuriating thing about that, it's not like those two albums have a lot in common. So it's not like you just have a different particular style that you really dig and you think Kiss nails that style. No, they're two totally different eras of the band, totally different eras of music in general. They're like 16 years apart in life. They sound nothing alike, sonically or stylistically, and yet you're like, oh no, these are the two best Kiss albums. So what it boils down to is basically, you love Kiss the most when they're being kissed the least. And that's why you are a terrible person. And my dog is barking. He agrees you suck. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the panel. I'm sorry I have to miss it.
All right, so first of all, it's not my second favorite Kiss album. It's in the top 5. The number 1 is the Kiss progressive rock concept album that sounds like a mixture of Rush and Final Fantasy music. So, yeah, notifying that. And then number 2 is the Peter Criss jazz album. So, yeah.
That still, like, really reinforces Mike's point.
Yeah, that's still
It's not a very Kiss-sounding album.
Look, I think, Steve, you can agree my musical tastes are pretty eclectic and all over the place.
Yeah.
And so I just sincerely enjoy the songwriting and songs on those albums more than the other Kiss stuff. For me, Kiss is a band that is, like 90% of the time, terrible lyrically, not really anything important to say, and I like it because I think the pop hooks are strong. This album, for some reason, the songs click with me on a lyrical level, they click with me on a musical level. I just sincerely love this album, and I understand it's weird because it's not my normal kind of music. I don't like grunge, I tend not to get into the heavier stuff, I'm more of a happy pop guy. But for some reason, the songs on this album just completely clicked with me, and it's just one of my favorites, and I'm looking forward to discussing it.
The trick is that Greg is secretly a 90s kid at heart. No matter how much he may deny it, soon we're going to get him he's going to be super into Fuel.
I mean, that's a great song.
Nah, the band.
No, I will tell you this. One of the few... I usually don't leave shows early if I'm paying full price for admission. And one of the few shows I left early was Riders on the Storm, which was the Doors fronted by the dude from Fuel. It was fucking terrible.
He left early because he had to get to the Three Doors Down show.
Yeah, I had to get to the Three Doors Down. Dude, it was like when they started playing Touch Me, I'm like, I'm out. I can't do this. I can't see this song being butchered this way.
Yeah, you know what you are, Greg? You're all of the Godsmack fans that love the new Godsmack album. You're everything that's wrong with the Godsmack fan. They're like, oh, it's so fun. It's so different. Yeah. I'm like, no, it's fucking garbage. Fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about. You say you don't like grunge, but you like the grunge Kiss album. You're just telling yourself that because it's Kiss. That's
in fairness, 2 of my top 5 favorite Kiss albums are well regarded by the fans, Rock and Roll Over and Creatures. Those are both considered to be classics, and by many cited as their number 1. So at least 2 of my top 5 aren't ridiculous bullshit, at least by the standards of Kiss fans. But look, I like Final Fantasy music, I like jazz, and I like deep, meaningful lyrical content. So,
you like jazz?
Yeah, I do. So this album, I think another reason why this album clicks with me is there was a band that was formed after this called Union. which the guitarist from Kiss at the time formed with a guy named John Corabi, who was the singer for Motley Crue. And so that band continued the musical style of that Motley Crue 94 album that John Corabi was on in Carnival of Souls. And so Union released 2 albums, and Carnival of Souls and that Motley Crue album are almost like Union albums in a way, where at live shows, Union would play songs from both those albums in their sets. So in a way, this is almost like part of the Union discography for me. And so because I liked that band and their songs, and these songs fit in with that style, it really clicked with me. And actually, the first version of any of these songs that I heard a Union cover of Jungle live on a Kiss podcast. I thought, wow, this is a really cool song I haven't heard before. And then eventually got the album later. So I really discovered this band through the side project the guitar player went on to after this. But
Fair.
but enough about the histories with the album. Let's get into our ranking.
All right.
So coming in as the least best song on Carnival of Souls, according to this panel, we have In the Mirror.
Oh wow, yeah, that was my bottom.
There's a pretty solid consensus on this one. No one gave it more than 4 points.
Yeah.
You got a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1.
Yeah, Chris Lathrop from Pot of Thunder would be furious if he was here right now, because that is by far his favorite cut from the album. But also, it's the only song that's like, yeah, chicks. So that's probably why he's into it.
So my big complaint with a lot of 80s Paul Stanley is that he was, trying to explore his vocal range by just singing really high notes over and over and over again. And he's got a lot of songs where it's just like, I'm singing a high note over and over and over again, and there's no melody. It's just this one note. This is that same song structure, but like as a grunge song, it's like, I'm singing one note over and over and over again. And it's not very impressive. And it's low. Any baritone can hit this note. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the most out of place song on the album for me, where it feels like it's trying to be both a sort of retro, like almost Hendrix style rock song and a grunge song, and it doesn't really work because it's trying to have rock and roll swagger while also still being kind of moody. And just this one is, I still enjoy the song because I think there's good riffing on it. I think Bruce's playing throughout this entire album is fantastic. Bruce Kulick, the guitarist. And I still enjoy the song, but it's just like, it's the most awkward composition-wise, where I've never really heard a song that tries to be Hendrix and grunge at the same time. And so because of that, it's a weird, out-of-place song musically, but I still sincerely enjoy it whenever it comes on, and I dig the cut. But if I'm cutting songs from the album, this would be the first to go, just because it feels out of place. Even though I didn't rank it at the bottom, this would be the first one I would cut.
Yeah, I would make it an EP and cut all but 4 songs if I were cutting the album.
I mean, so would Steve on most Kiss albums.
That's my take on most Kiss albums.
Yeah, this one, for me, it's like the most potboilery sounding song on the album. I put this one as number 11, so second from the bottom. It just sounds unenthused. I don't know. It kind of sounds like they don't know what they want to do with the track, and they don't really care that they don't know, and they just decided to put it on the album anyways. There's not really anything there.
Wait, Paul Simon co-wrote this?
No, that can't be right. That's got to be an error on Genius.com.
Okay, it's probably, because it says Curtis Kumo, Bruce Kulick, and Paul Simon.
That's Paul Stanley. So the trick with, I think, a lot of this, I think Paul is out of his element on this album. Paul Stanley likes to sing about partying and getting laid, and he's not generally an angsty guy. He can do angst, but he is generally not very angsty. And so this, him trying to be like, I'm angsty about getting laid, it's a little bit awkward. The song about, this chick, man, she's kind of a bitch. Here's a song about it. Joe,
I found this song to be very derivative and I'll use that word a lot on
Yeah.
this album. It's very derivative of like Soundgarden. There is a bit of a Jimi Hendrix thing, I guess, in it that I didn't notice before, but I listened to the track while you guys were talking a little bit. And like, yeah, kind of it's in there. It's a fun riff in the verses, but nothing's really pulling me into the song. There's like a good drumming breakdown thing that's kind of nice, but I hate that chorus. Where it's just like droning about take a look in the mirror.
Every
Not
line's getting
interesting.
clearer.
And I don't know. I did not like the song at all. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Yeah, I think I would say definitely one of the weaker choruses on the album. I think the verses and the pre-chorus are actually pretty fun. I like sort of the arpeggiated, playing in the pre-chorus. I think that sounds cool. So I think like they're playing well on the track, but I think it's ultimately my main critique of this one would be it's really lacking an engaging melody. But I think the music underneath is actually pretty solid throughout. So yeah, next up on the list we have In My Head.
Oh wow. I want to set my second for the bottom as well. It's like this is just my list.
Yeah,
Okay.
Joe is calling it. Joe really has a good pulse for what Kiss is all about.
Okay. This is what I put. It's heavy, so that's cool for me, I guess. There's some good guitar stuff. It's not catchy though, and it's a boring song, and the drummer is from another band. That's what I put here. And this is a complaint I have on pretty much the entire album, except for the song Hate, I think, is that the drummer, I don't know the members of Kiss. I'm sorry, I don't. Whoever's drumming in this band, in this album, is in another band. He's in another band with like a different like drum tone to him. And he's like hanging back, and he's like kicking back with his regular old rock beats, with these metal riffs, and he's just not like supporting them in the way that they should be. So I just noticed that, especially in this song, and then I noticed it for the whole album. I was like, this drummer is just not getting what he should be doing during these songs. So that was my big note for this song. Otherwise, it's just like not catchy and boring.
So what's interesting about that, the drummer on this album, this is his second album with Kiss, is Eric Singer, one of the most famous hired gun musicians of all time, who has been passed around through a million bands, played with Alice Cooper, played with Brian May, played with Black Sabbath, and is basically like one of the world's go-to guys if you need a really solid professional drummer who will get the job done on your album. And so it is interesting that you don't like the drum approach on the album, which I think is a very valid complaint, to say that this album could have used a drummer to approach it in less of a rock style and more of a metal style. And it's
just a grunge style.
Yeah, and it's
it could
not
be
that
how it's mic'd and recorded though. It could be that.
Yeah, it's a very dry sounding album in a lot of ways, which the producer, it's the same guy who did the Alice in Chains albums. So that's probably why it sounds like Alice in Chains, because it's the same producer as
Also
Alice in Chains.
Yeah, play the same sort of notes.
Right. But I think the production in a lot of ways sounds a little bit thin for the material, where I think just like a lot of these songs, I think if you had the production of something like the Black Album, for example, I think the songs would stand out a lot more. But because you have that like really dry production, some of the songs sound a little bit thin when they're actually pretty stinking heavy. And so this song, I think, once again, for most of the songs of the album, actually pretty much all, I'll say I really enjoy the lyrics. I think with this album, Gene Simmons was the one who really wanted to pursue this direction. Paul Stanley did not want to make this kind of album. Paul wanted to write his catchy, fun pop songs, and Gene was in his angry at God phase, because their drummer, Eric Carr, previous drummer, had died of cancer. And so he was the previous Eric in the band had died of cancer. And so Gene was getting really angsty. So the last album, there were a couple Gene is angry at God songs. And this album, he just went full off the deep end where, I guess he had a conversation with Paul Stanley and said, Paul, you don't know what's going on with music. There are bands like Metallica, there are bands like Smashing Pumpkins. They're singing about real things that matter, and we're just singing these stupid pop songs about getting laid. We need to do songs that matter. And Gene pushed for it really hard, so Paul conceded. And because this is more of a Gene direction album, I think Gene ultimately is more naturally fitting into these songs because this is what he wants to do. He wants to be dark, he wants to be heavy, and he has these intense emotions he's working through. And so because of that, I think this song is very strong. It's, reflective about, the dark side of human nature. It's got, really creepy, uncomfortable harmonies, a nice bone-crunching riff. It has a good drive to it where, even though it's towards the bottom of the list, I still dig this tune quite a bit.
Yeah, I probably gave it the most points. I put this one right in the middle at number 6. I don't know. It's like another one of the awkwardly grunge-centric songs on the album. But this one was less annoying to me because it wasn't a direct ripoff of another song, first of all. And secondly, I don't know, I thought it was fine. It's just like a middle ground track on the album. I don't know, I don't hate it, but honestly, the only songs I would listen to on this album, like, ever again, probably, would be anything in the top 3 or 4. And this one's below that as like, the song was all right. It was kind of whatever. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about it other than it's another awkward, grungy song that they made, but it doesn't piss me off as much as some of the other ones. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So to summarize, 3 out of 4 panelists. Oh, sorry.
There's a catchiness that's lacking in this song. It's just like in my head, and it just like. The song just like keeps droning on. That's why I found it kind of boring. So I don't know.
Yeah, I described it as plotting.
I didn't look at the lyrics, but yeah, plotting is a great way to describe it.
Yeah, I will say one thing I will definitely concede about this album. I have met very few people who like this album on a first listen. I've met many people who said that this album grew on them, like Chris Lathrop from Pot of Thunder. He said when he first heard this album, he thought it was a piece of shit, and now it's one of his favorites. So it isn't the easy pop hook album. So in the same way that, to compare it to albums we've done previously, Megadeth's Rust in Peace and Metallica's And Justice for All are not very welcoming for new listeners. This album definitely isn't. And before our panelists get angry with me, I do think those are better albums than Carnival of Souls. I was just making the comparison, as far as inaccessible albums go. I do like Carnival more than Justice, but that's, Justice, it took a very long time to grow on me, and I've only just liked it recently, versus I've liked this album for a very long time.
Carnival of Justice.
But yeah. Still no Rust in Peace.
All right. Whatever.
All right. What's the next Alice in Kiss Garden song?
All right, so next up on the list, we have Seduction of the Innocent.
Yes. The bottom for me. It's just annoying. This one was like hard to listen to. I was like, God. And then, this one I try for these podcasts, I try to binge the albums before we do the recordings, right? And this is the one where I listened to it like 1.25 times. And I tried to listen to Seduction of the Innocent last night as I was at work, and I was just like, fuck, I can't do this right now. Like, God, should I just tell Greg, like, I can't, man. I just can't. And it was this one. I was like so annoyed by it, and then I kick it on when I wake up this morning, and I'm like, "Oh, this again?" Like, it's just, there's something about it that's just annoying to me, and I can't, man. I can't do this song. It's, God damn it. I didn't look at lyrical content or whatever. It's just irritating. It's just one of those ones, they did a study in like. Sabotage by Beastie Boys made people more angry and agitated. Like, this would be my Sabotage. Seduction of the Innocent.
Sabotage of the Innocent.
If it was playing while I was at a pawn shop or something or shopping, I'd just be like, fuck, where's the cereal? Do they never have the multi-grain Cheerios in the same fucking place as the other Cheerios in this goddamn store? And you're like, what is that song? What is that song playing right now? Yeah, it's I don't know. There's something about it. I can't do. Can't do it. Fuck.
So, go ahead.
Okay. My notes for Seduction of the Innocent. Well, I put it like fifth for the bottom. It's kind of in the middle for me. I put What the Fuck Is This in my notes as soon as it started. It sounds like it comes from another album. And yeah, it just kind of like, I thought it had a good guitar solo. I don't really like the sections of the song that go into a major key, but the rest is okay. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah, it starts off like a Beach Boys song almost, you know, like.
Man, some nice falsetto oohs would have really like kicked this album into high gear.
That would have been pretty great. So I'll go ahead and go next. So mentioning how the song sounds a little bit different and out of place, this is actually the song that it dates back farthest back in Kiss history, songwriting-wise, where Gene wrote the song when he was a young teenager, like I think like age 13 or 14, or wrote the beginning of the song, where Gene Simmons, for those who don't know, was born in Israel. He was the child of a Holocaust survivor and then moved to the United States when he was young. Didn't speak English when he first moved to the country, so had to learn how to speak English. But he was raised on Middle Eastern music. And so these kind of melodies are just sort of ingrained in his soul and psyche. And one of the early songs he wrote was essentially what became the verse for this song, where he took the melody and the chords he played in that song and then reworked it into a song on this album. And lyrically, it's another Gene is angry at God and religion song, continuing with that angst. But I sincerely love this entire piece. I think the change to a major key makes it kind of fascinating because it's that weird mixture of Middle Eastern music and Western music coming together in an unexpected way. And
Midwestern music.
Midwestern music. Hey, I'm from Cleveland, so that makes sense. But I think that combination is fascinating. And admittedly, the first few times I heard the song, I didn't get it. I didn't really like it. And then one time while listening to the album, I was tired as fuck and fell asleep while listening to Seduction of the Innocent. And then I woke up and listened to it again and thought it was rad as shit. So something about listening to it in a dream state made me appreciate the song. So I don't do drugs. I don't get high. But maybe I needed to be in an altered state of consciousness to understand the song.
Something about being unconscious just makes this album so much more bearable.
Yeah.
But
like, if I could sleep and listen, hell yeah.
but like it's I've never really had that experience with a song where, I fell asleep to it and then like being in that dream state made it like click in my brain. So now when I listen to it, it completely resonates with me. And perhaps part of it is because, I didn't grow up in the Middle East and those melodies aren't ingrained in my brain. And so I had to be in an altered state of consciousness to understand it. But now, and I understand, like, that is not an experience that most people can go through. So if you say you don't like Seduction of the Innocent because you never fell asleep to it and had a dream-like experience, awakening your mind to the song, I get it. This isn't the hill I'm going to die on. But because I had that specific experience, I sincerely love the song, and it's one of my favorite deep cuts in the catalog. Yeah, and the lyrics would have been great either way, but musically, it resonates with me because of that experience.
See,
Jesus.
Around this time, the time this album came out, I was listening to a ton of, as we were discussing earlier in the podcast, I was listening to a ton of Live, and that whole East meets West, vaguely Middle Eastern thing was their bread and butter. So, like, I got this song right away. I ranked it still, like, in the middle because I like that mashup of, those tones. That sounds cool to me. But this was the third sort of plodding grunge by numbers song in a row that they had.
Road, and they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the time I got to this one, I was like, I don't know, like, pick up the tempo, you guys. Play faster. Stop being boring.
You know, I'm very disappointed Kiss never did an authentic thrash song with this lineup because they definitely could have played it. Like, I just wanted them to be really sincerely thrashy on one cut and not fake thrash like Boomerang, that giant pile of shit.
I feel like if they want to do, I don't know, like to me, the greatest Middle Eastern riff ever is just in Holy Wars with that Megadeth where he just breaks down into the Middle Eastern thing. Like, I feel like it works at times, but I don't know, man. I think it's the down tuning of it. That is not Middle Eastern-y to me at all. Like a down tuned little ditty that they played. It sounds wrong. Like, I don't know. There's just something about it that just like I don't think of Middle Eastern influenced music and think of like a down tuned grunge song. So I think I'd appreciate it more if it was like not a grunge song, you know. It was just a rock song. God damn it, I don't know.
Yeah, so I could see like the production of this song, being a turn off from it because it is. I'm saying the production doesn't make the songwriting pop necessarily. It does make it sort of become a more background experience. I absolutely agree with that statement.
And when it comes to this album, I know you said it was leaked. Was it ever like fully mastered?
So the producer who did this album claims that it was fully mastered. I don't necessarily.
I don't believe him at all.
Yeah, I don't. I think this album could have used a different mastering job. I think our buddy Joe Palmaccio, who appeared on our Hotter Than Hell episode and remastered the entire Kiss catalog up to Crazy Nights, if he had mastered this album, I think it would sound phenomenal. And so, shout out to you, Joe. You should have gotten paid to do this. I think that would have been awesome. But,
right.
The single from this one were one.
Vocals are really loud. I don't know. There's things about this album that drive me nuts.
I think the producer from what I heard from Bruce Kulick, the guitar player, he said that the producer and him actually disagreed about the sound. And that the producer was trying really hard to make a statement with his production on this Kiss album. And he thought that some of the songs would work better with mixes that he had done. And I actually I believe Bruce on that, because I think a lot of these songs just, mix them a little bit differently. I think the songwriting would stand out better.
Yeah, it'd pop a little bit more. Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, next up on the list, we have I Will Be There. The awkward Zeppelin-style song on the album. Like, hey guys, grunge is cool. You know what else is cool? Led Zeppelin ballads.
I bet you I put this one the highest. I put this as number 3. This one to me sounds more like a Bon Jovi song.
That's a very Bon Jovi title.
And that's why I put it so low, but go ahead.
I was like, this is their Bon Jovi song for the album, but I don't know, I kind of liked it. I don't know, it just seemed fine. I guess I'm the minority here, but it seemed okay. I mean, as far as like songs that they've ripped off with this album, or sounds that they've ripped off with this album, I thought this was the least egregious one, and it doesn't really have a feel on the same level as the rest of the album. It's one of those kind of more awkward ones because it's not, to me, it didn't feel as grungy. I don't know, but yeah, it just seemed like a closer to the heart song. Fuck you guys.
So
I don't know if I'd say that they ever ripped off Bon Jovi, considering that like it was the exact same songwriters writing songs for both bands. That'd be like saying Pearl Jam ripped off Temple of the Dog.
Well, it sounds like Bon Jovi though. You can have a writer.
And in fairness, Paul Stanley introduced Bon Jovi to Desmond Child. Paul was like, I'm too busy to write songs with you. Here's my friend. So.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
But as far as I Will Be There goes, Kaleb, you said you were sensing like sincerity from this song. This is a song that Paul Stanley wrote for his firstborn son, who, when Paul Stanley has talked about this album, he's generally unfavorable towards it. He doesn't like this album. But he thinks this is a great song, and he has said that is his son's favorite Kiss song. Because of the song his dad wrote about him and recorded on an album. And so it is sincerely about his love for his child, done in sort of a Led Zeppelin style. I guess Paul received a weird Middle Eastern instrument as a gift for his birthday one year, which he said he doesn't even know the name of what kind of instrument it is, but he made up a tuning for it and wrote a song on it, and that became I Will Be There for this album. And so it's a sincere, love song from parent to child. And so that's probably why, you're feeling that sincerity from it. For me, I like all these songs. The melody during the verses, I think it's in too low of a register, and so it's not really shining melodically. But I think Paul Stanley's vocal at the end, when he's just kind of wailing and getting up into his higher register, it's emotive and powerful. One of his best vocals in the catalog at the end of the song. And, great acoustic solo from Bruce. So it's a mixed bag for me in terms of the melody throughout, but I still definitely enjoy it.
Hot take. The only good song about somebody's kid being born is Still Fighting It by Ben Folds. The rest of them, this one, Hey Jude, Tears in Heaven, Arms Wide Open, suck.
Hey Jude?
Yep, Hey Jude sucks.
He's just a poor kid from the stupid ages.
No, all right.
Hey Jude's not a good song.
Absolute fucking madness.
Hey
look,
Jude
I know I've got some bullshit
bad
opinions.
song.
I'm sticking up for music from the outer, but Hey Jude, are you fucking insane?
The way Hey Jude works is everybody's bored until it gets to the na-na-nas. Everybody is bored until it gets to the na-na-nas, and then those go on forever.
No, Paul McCartney doing this song live is a magical, life-changing experience. You are wrong.
A life-changing experience because you're so bored.
No, damn! No, you're absolutely full of shit.
It's time you did some
Steve.
explaining.
No, that is absolute insanity. That is a great song, beautiful lyrics. Like the emotion and sincerity from the piece is phenomenal. The vamp is great. It is
The vamp is so long.
The vamp is great, and dude, I've covered that song live. It is so fun to do. The crowd is into it. It's a sing along. You jam out.
The crowd's excited because they get to sing along at the end, but then they forget how long it is until the sing along part, and then how long the sing along part does the same thing over and over again.
Steve, I love you. You're my best friend. Fuck you.
But Mike would agree with me.
That's bullshit. That's like top 5 songs ever made. Like, it's great, man.
Yeah, when you were saying hot take, I thought, oh, he's gonna shit on Carnival of Souls. That's not a hot take. I wasn't concerned. But then you shit on Hey Jude.
Yep.
Yeah, that is a hot take. God damn it! I don't even.
It's like a contest between you two. It's like, all right, before you start the episode, you're like, okay,
Who can have the shittiest
piss
opinion?
these 2 guys off, and they have to go out of the episode thinking like, who do I hate more? And like not being able to answer that question, be like, God damn it, which one of these 2 men makes me more angry? And I never know. Like, I know it's Steve. Like deep down inside, the unconscious mind sees Steve, and it's like, that's the one. He's the one trying to destroy the fabric of society. But then Greg will say something, and I'm like, shit. Greg just like diverted from the Steve. Steve is so clear in his insanity and his like willingness to destroy all. I'm excited to see what Greg does.
Yeah, that's the real question. Is like I've set the bar pretty high early in the episode. How are you going to top that, Greg? In terms of hateable opinions,
I don't know, so the thing is, like, you're more upfront with your hateable opinions. You're just like, you rip off your shirt, you've got an anarchy symbol tattooed on your chest, and like, look at me, fuck all of you. And then I'm more like the Light Yagami in Death Note, where like I'm subtly doing evil things, and then before you know it, you're like, what? Where did this come from? Like, my evil sneaks up on you, but you're just like wagging your dick in people's faces. Like, God damn.
My evil dick.
Look into its eye. And see the truth as I see it. Hey Jude is a terrible song. Yes.
Feel the hate flow through you.
Absolute fucking insane. All right, let's go back to this song, which is good, not Hey Jude level.
I will be there. Okay. All right. I like the guitar stuff. Pretty great. The lyrics need some rounding out, in my opinion. There's a lot of forced rhymes on this album. I don't know if that's just like a Kiss staple, but like sometimes they just like are forcing a rhyme and it doesn't really work for me. So that was just one of the notes I had on this one. I don't remember the line that I would have had a problem with, but to me, the vocals were mixed too loud, and Bon Jovi did this song better with "Wanted Dead or Alive." So, sorry, that's how I feel about the third worst song on this album. I will be there.
Yeah. Once again, I don't really hear Bon Jovi in this. I hear Zeppelin, which maybe comes from my familiarity with Zeppelin and Bon Jovi, as opposed to I assume I probably listen to more Zeppelin and Bon Jovi than all the other panelists. I think that's probably safe to assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to
More Bon Jovi than me.
I don't know. Joe loves Bon Jovi, dude.
Fucking love Bon Jovi.
You probably listen to more Zeppelin than Joe, though. Zeppelin's one of those like revered bands. It's like, yeah, I'll listen to it every once in a while. Got Mothership, you know. It's whatever. It's good. It's great.
But yeah,
Bon Jovi, and I'm Wanted Dead or Alive. I swear to God, the guitar tone is exactly the same.
you mean acoustic?
It's the way it's recorded, man. There's
a lot of ways to record an acoustic, Greg.
Right. No, I'm being facetious.
I agree with Joe, though. That's what I heard with this song, too. I heard Wanted Dead or Alive. I was like, wow, I went from Alice in Chains ripoff to Soundgarden ripoff to Bon Jovi ripoff. Like, the range.
The range of more popular 90s acts they can rip off.
And what's really fun about this album is the bands they're ripping off are all bands that were influenced by them. Like, Alice in Chains has cited Kiss as a huge influence, so has Smashing Pumpkins, so has Bon Jovi. So they're ripping off bands that ripped off them at the beginning.
This album sounds super mediocre. It's gone through too many
rip-off cycles.
Filters. Yeah, it's like over-filtered coffee. Just like keeps going, and you just it doesn't work at the end. No, there's like literally the part where he goes, "I will be there." So it's like, I'm wanted. Yeah. Even that like little note thing. I swear to God, if it's the same songwriter, it makes sense. But unfortunately, he wrote a better song for Jovi.
No, this isn't the same songwriter. Desmond Child is not involved on this album. Which,
oh wow, well then.
Which honestly, it would have helped this album because Desmond Child is a great songwriter. I think some Desmond Child presence would have made this a better album, and I still like this album a lot. But I think, yeah, bring back Desmond. It's never a bad idea to bring in Desmond Child.
Who's this Curtis Cuomo guy who co-wrote like everything?
He's just a friend of the band essentially, and he also co-wrote a bunch of the stuff for Union. So basically, just a guy that Bruce and the other guys were friends with, and they're just like, hey, let's jam together. Like, the way that Kiss co-wrote songs, like, starting really in the 80s, is, like, Paul would invite, like, a friend over to jam, or Gene and Paul would invite friends over to jam, and they would just write songs together. Rather than in the 70s, they would just, like, sit and play something on an acoustic guitar, and then teach it to the rest of the band. So they decided, like, they enjoyed the jam aspect of songwriting, and so that's how they, had these sort of same songwriters reappearing from album to album, just like inviting someone to hang out. So it'd be like if we invited Chase over to hang out and jam, and then wrote a song. So it's just like, oh, we're just writing songs with our friends.
Their buddy Curtis was just hanging around, bringing him snacks, and they gave him co-write credit on the album.
Yeah, pretty much.
Insulting.
But yeah, next up on the list we have... All right, I'm done talking about this great song. You could have used the crappy song drop there and I wouldn't have fought you as hard.
Again, it's randomized. I can't tell you which one it's going to play. Or it might also be the, Groundskeeper Willie one.
All right, I'm done talking about this crappy song. There you go. But I like I said, I like every cut on this album. But there's a few cuts in this album where someone says, I don't like it. I'm like, yeah, I totally get that. And then there's a couple that I think are just so good where I'm like, no excuse for not liking this. This is brilliant. Next up on the list is the song I ranked at the bottom, so if you don't like this one, totally get it. It Never Goes Away. The panning is kind of annoying to listen to in headphones. That intro is grating and uncomfortable. But, really, this is Kiss just getting back to their doom metal roots, like at the end of Black Diamond.
No.
So, it's Kiss being slow and doomy, and it's, once again, Paul Stanley angst. He tried. He tried. Paul Stanley is I think he wasn't actually sincerely angsty on this album was the issue, because there is a solo album he did right after his divorce that is sincerely angsty and succeeds better with Paul Stanley angst. But this song, I think Paul Stanley is a guy who will always give his 100% effort to what he's doing, even if it's not within his comfort zone. And so,
even if he's just not very good at it.
I think this is a good song. I think the vocals are very good. I think the riffing is good. It's, like a slower Black Sabbath deep cut that the diehard Sabbath fans are into, but the average music listener isn't a fan of. If you put this on an early Sabbath album with Ozzy singing, I think it would fit in very well. And yeah, I enjoy the cut, but I also ranked it at the bottom because, it's the it feels, you can tell that Paul is trying hard, and I think he does a good job, but you can tell it's someone doing something outside of their comfort zone. But I still enjoy listening to it, so I give it a thumbs up.
Man, this song is about as successful as a Doom or Sabbath-esque song as Boomerang is a Metallica thrash song.
Look, don't sully the good name of this album by, comparing it to Boomerang.
It's the same band, Greg.
Yeah, but no, Boomerang isn't music. Boomerang is an abomination upon this planet. It's an insult to Metallica to compare that song to them. Boomerang is just... I don't have words to describe it. If only I could go off for 30 minutes about how shitty that song is.
Please don't. We've got a limited battery life on somebody's microphone.
Yeah, so fuck Boomerang. It's a piece of shit. One of the worst pieces of quote-unquote music ever recorded.
Greg, you're ranting again.
God damn, I fucking hate that song. Yeah, so...
Let me see if I can find the drop.
No, don't.
Rock and roll! Look, it's rock and roll!
No.
Look, it's rock and roll!
Oh, god damn it, no! Alright, I'm getting PTSD from listening to Boomerang.
Oh, what the fuck's going on right now? Okay.
Boomerang is a Kiss quote-unquote song that is the worst thing you might ever hear in your entire life.
Alright, I'll be sure to listen to it right after we're done here.
Don't do it. Don't do it if you value your sanity.
It never goes away. I put it as number 2. It does sound like an Alice in Chains ripoff, but I thought it was a pretty good one. It lacks the production of Alice in Chains, which is odd because apparently it's the same producer. So I don't know what the fuck's going on there. The first half of this album, I was writing down notes going like, this singer is not comfortable in this lower register. He's not comfortable in this lower register. And halfway through this song, near the end, he actually hits into a higher register, and his voice sounds a lot better. The lyrics to me in this song don't sound forced like they did in a lot of the songs previous to it. And you know what? I like the riff. I like the feel of the song. It's a little droney, but there are worse droney songs on this album, and I thought it was honestly pretty decent. So I thought it was okay.
Where did you put it?
Put it as number 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jesus. I put it as number 7. I think it's middle tier. It's a serious Alice in Chains ripoff, and like Joe said, it doesn't sound as good as Alice in Chains, which is weird because Alice in Chains, while they were a big grunge band, Kiss was a massive band. They have been, and will always be a huge band. So, why? It just doesn't sound as good. I don't know. This is the one that is almost the most Alice in Chains ripoff song. It's right below another one that is absolutely an Alice in Chains ripoff, but it has their tone, but it doesn't have their. They're just not comfortable with this song. It feels like, like what Joe said, no one really. It seems like you're doing a commercial for something that you don't really care about. It's like if Joe and I had to do a commercial for Final Fantasy Union, the podcast. If it came to that somehow, it would be this song just with our voices. Like it would just be like no one really knows what's going on. Like why are we doing this? I don't know. But we're here. Let's just make it sound like this thing, and this thing to them was Alice in Chains. So I put it in the middle. I don't know. It sounds like a not good Alice in Chains song.
I wonder if the reason it doesn't sound as good as Alice in Chains is because by this point in his career, what's his name? Toby
Wright. We met him at Rockin' Pod.
I wonder if he was as successful as that band was, if he was doing as much heroin as Alice in Chains was.
Yeah, I'm amazed at all these bands that like watching Metallica shows from the 90s and 80s and like how shit-faced they are. I'm like, man, I can barely like stand up to piss, and they're out there just tearing it up.
Just playing a lot of notes for being on that many downers.
Yeah, like how many beers has this man had, and he's tearing it right the fuck up. Like, man, these guys, they're way better than I could ever imagine to be, But this one, yeah, I don't know. It just seems like a song that never should have been theirs, and it wasn't from the beginning, and it just, I don't know. I don't like it. Middle ground.
I would say of all the songs that Paul wrote for the album, this is the one that feels like he was trying the hardest. And I think that's also probably why it doesn't succeed. I think there's a few other songs that, like, I think, I don't know if you guys can tell the differences in the singers and on this album, where there's actually 3 different vocalists on this album. Paul Stanley sings about half the album, Gene Simmons sings about half, and then Bruce Kulick sings one cut.
It's one song.
Well, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But I think, Paul Stanley isn't used to singing this kind of stuff, isn't comfortable writing this kind of stuff. I think he did an admirable job, in the same way where when I went to jazz camp, I would sign up for all the weird stuff that was difficult and foreign to me. Like, they had a beatboxing class, and I thought, I have no respect for beatboxing. I think it's bullshit. I'm going to sign up for it to see if I learn something about myself as a musician and become better. And so I did beatboxing, and I did a competent job. I'm not a great beatboxer, but I was able to do it and perform at a show in front of a large crowd doing beatboxing as my instrument, quote unquote. So I view that exercise kind of the same thing here, except, Paul's buddy Gene was like, can we please do a dark, heavy album? Pretty please. I promise to be good. And Paul's like, fine, let me write something dark and heavy. But Paul Stanley, consummate professional, I think still put out something that is, I wouldn't say there's anything that's out and out bad on this album. There might be stuff that isn't as catchy or as strong as some of their other material, but I don't think there's anything that's out and out just bad. Except for maybe Seduction of the Innocent, according to some of the panelists.
I don't know. Steve?
This was the other plotty one, so like I don't really have much to say on it, and that it and In My Head sort of blend together as these slow caricatures of grunge that aren't very fun to listen to and don't really succeed in any reasonable way.
I don't know. I dig the riff, so maybe that's just why I put it up so high. It's a simple grunge metal riff, but I like it. Whatever, guys.
All right, so next up on the list, we have Master and Slave.
Why is that so low?
Because
what number are we on?
We're about halfway through the album. It's because Kaleb and Steve hate this. They have teamed up against you and myself, Joe, because you and I put in the exact same spot.
What the fuck is wrong with you guys?
This is the Sex Type Thing song from that one band that sounds just like that other band.
STP.
Yes. This is the most Audio Slave Stone Temple Pilots thing I've heard since Audio Slave and Stone Temple Pilots.
It's subtle shaded Audio Slave.
I like Audio Slave a lot. I like him better than
Also, wasn't this recorded pre-Audio Slave? What year was Audio Slave?
Oh yeah,
It was.
Yeah.
But
so Audio Slave heard this and like, shoot, we need to rip this off.
Yeah. Trick with Audio Slave is they should be way better than they are, considering it's Chris Cornell and Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Chris Cornell is in the band.
Right. Yeah. Chris Cornell is a great vocalist.
Yeah. I like him more than Soundgarden easily. Soundgarden has deeper songs, but Audio Slave is...
Oh man, I much prefer Soundgarden.
See that Soundgarden and that other one whose name I forget all the time. Two weakest big four of grunge to me.
Oh, STP?
Pearl Jam?
No. Pearl Jam, that's right. Yeah, Pearl Jam, the biggest one. Can't get into, really. It's not a bad song. I just don't think it's their song. I think this is a Stone Temple Pilots song. So I put it pretty low. They don't do anything that I like. They don't do anything that I prefer over the original song. So I put it at number 10. I put it pretty far down there. It's just not really. It doesn't seem original at all. Like, it seems reminiscent. The whole time I was listening to this album, I was like, man, I want to listen to some grunge right now. Like, I don't want to listen to this shit. I don't want to listen to grunge, 10-calorie grunge from Kiss. I want to listen to real grunge, you know.
Grunge light.
Yeah, it's like Bud Light with, fewer calories but the same refreshing taste, except for we all know that's not true.
I mean,
Tastes great, less Nickelback.
To your credit, Paul Stanley agrees with you. He said about this album, the world didn't need a second-rate Metallica or a second-rate Alice in Chains. Metallica is better being Metallica than we are, and Alice in Chains is better being Alice in Chains than we are. We should just be Kiss.
You'll notice he didn't say the world doesn't need a second-rate Stone Temple Pilots, because he wasn't even willing to demote himself that much.
That's fair.
I can't believe they went in thinking we need to answer to Metallica, and then they didn't at all. Like, none of this is Metallica. There's like one cool solo in the entire album, and that's it. And like the Black Album, like how is this an answer to the Black Album?
Yeah, this is not an answer to Metallica.
I think their mind answer to Metallica just means heavier. Is what they thought.
That's like it's like yeah, I guess yeah. It's like.
Look, I'm not saying that they succeeded necessarily in answering Metallica. To me, this doesn't. Like, when they say they were trying to answer Metallica, even I'm like, I don't really see it. Other than just, like, this is your heavy album.
They were like, we're going to take the guitar god caliber of grunge and the production of early 90s Metallica.
Yeah, no, that's not even what this is. If they had the production of early 90s Metallica, this would be a much better album. And
Bob Rock producing it, it'd be a better album overall, just overall.
Yeah, I mean, because the Karabi album, the Motley Crue 94 album, is a fantastic sounding album. I think it's the best Motley Crue album. And, it's a huge part of it is Bob Rock's production and John Karabi's vocals and songwriting. It's just a massive, stinking, heavy, badass album. That's sort of the sister album to this in a lot of ways. But, as we're on to Master and Slave, if we're talking about alt-rock songs that, this is ripping off, the one that comes to my mind is a song I'm not a fan of, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, in the sense that you've got that driving bass riff during the verses, and then you've got the all the instruments coming in and becoming very massive and sing-along during the chorus. But I think I really dig the groove of the song. I think the way that the rhythm section works during the verses keeps a lot of momentum. It's very driving. I think this is a song that works really well as a catchier song on the album. I could see this song being performed live and killing it. I think there's a lot of cool musical sections to it. I think, when there's the part where Paul Stanley says, count to 4 and catch my breath, and then it goes into a quieter section. And I think that was a really cool arrangement choice. And then the line where, Paul Stanley's saying, it's after the solo, like, life, wakes you from your dreams, and then the obvious rhyme in that section is to say the word scream, but instead of saying the word scream, he just screams. And to me, that's just a badass moment, because Paul is a great vocalist, it's a clever musical decision, and it sounds freaking cool. It's a catchy song, good lyrics, great playing, just driving throughout, and I think it has some swagger. And this is an album that doesn't have as much swagger because it's trying to be more dark and brooding, but it's dark and brooding with swagger, and I think this one completely succeeds.
I'm going to agree with Greg.
Whoa, that's a hot take.
First off, yeah, good speed to this song. It's got a beat to it, and it's going forward. And honestly, most of the songs on this album should have been brought up like a few beats per minute, just to like get the album going a little bit more. But yeah, I think the structure is a lot of fun when the guitars come in and they go away and the bass kind of hits it in the riffs and stuff like, or in the verses. I think his voice is better in this song than it is in most of the other songs. Of course, I say his, whichever vocalist is doing it. I don't know. Yeah, digging that bass line with the bass kick drum underneath it. It's a lot of fun, which none of the rest of this album is that fun. And I wish the lyrics were a little catchier, but I think like the melody is pretty catchy. So I don't know, man. Like, just to refresh myself, when I like went through this album, I listened to a few seconds of each song. I was just like, oh yeah, Master and Slave. I think I probably should have ranked it as number 2 instead of number 3. But yeah, I dig this song. Actually, I think it's not bad. It's in my not bad section. Yeah, whatever, fine.
I'm
with Greg. Hashtag I'm with Greg.
You guys both ranked it the same.
Yeah, Joe and I put in the exact same spot. So Steve, you hated this one.
Yeah, no, those vocal dips were super silly. I didn't enjoy those.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought this was sincerely just very cool. This was the awkwardness I've mentioned on some of the other tracks where I still like the songs, but I feel the awkwardness. I feel Paul Stanley is very confident on this track. And I think, yeah, it's a standout cut from the album. But not according to this panel. According to this panel, Joe and I are full of shit. Hashtag I'm with Joe.
I mean, according to this panel, the song's right in the middle, so theoretically on a good album, that would be a, pretty solid song. Or on a medium album, that'd be a pretty medium song. On this album...
Unfortunately,
it's on this album.
All right.
It is derivative of so many bands, though. Like, so many bands just put it in one song. I don't care, though. Like, I had fun with this one.
All right, so next up on the list, we have a song that one of the panelists ranked as the best song on the album, and one of the panelists ranked as the worst song on the album. We've got I Confess next on the list.
All right.
Really?
Who's the naysayer here?
Who would be the naysayer on this track?
Wait, I'm confused. Who ranked this first?
Joe.
First.
God damn it, Joe.
Yeah, so Joe ranked this as number 1. Who ranked this at the bottom? Oh, wait, it's Steve.
Yeah, Greg, you have the spreadsheet all messed up. You show it as me ranking it first when I did not.
No, I'm looking at it on my phone. I think that's just the way it formatted there, because I've got you ranking it as giving it 1 point.
Oh, you're right. I'm reading those numbers backwards. Yes.
So yes, Steve, you put this at the very bottom. Joe, you put this at the very top. Have at it, boys.
Joe, I cede the floor to you.
I'm letting you go first, man. I already said that.
All right. Oh, I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Landed with a positive note here.
All right. Hey, so I actually wrote a whole paragraph about this. So remember, like, when Alice Cooper became a Christian and he did a concept album about that journey, and the song that was, like, closest to being a title track of the album was discussing spirituality and spiritual warfare, and it was sort of, like, framed in the context of a bad relationship, and then it ended with a fading out solo and, like, a vaguely demonic voice muttering cryptic things. And then 3 years later, Kiss did it. Except instead of like being a really like personal thing where he was trying to explore his own journey through life and the mistakes that he'd made, and he had like really good writers like Neil Gaiman helping him out. It was just Paul trend chasing.
All right, so
I didn't enjoy this one.
So the trick is this is a Gene song.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so this is a Gene song. It's Paul during the choruses, but Gene during the verses.
Ah.
And this is basically another Gene is angry at religion song. Running theme on this album.
That's true.
So, angsty Gene, remember, who is Jewish, not a born-again Christian, has some angst about religion. But I'm going to let Joe go, because I'm really curious as to his thoughts on this.
Look, this song has a different flavor from the rest of the album, and not in a it sounds like a Bon Jovi song kind of way. I think this song doesn't sound super, to me. I guess I have limited knowledge here. It doesn't sound like super derivative like a lot of the other songs do.
It sounds like an Alice Cooper song from this era.
I disagree, personally.
All right, hold on. I dig the mood of the song. Like when it goes into I think they're synthesizer, string things during the verses.
I think those are cellos, actually.
We're just not letting you finish. Sorry. Wait, I've got that.
I thought the lyrics were all right. Once again, a lot of forced rhymes on this album, and in this song, it didn't bother me. Really cool kind of flavor to this song. I think his voice, both their voices, I guess, they're pretty good in this song. And I think the chorus, honestly, is pretty catchy, and I dig it. No complaints here. I might even like this song. Really good bridge as well. And you know what? I've listened to this song 5 times in the last 24 hours, so I stand by it. I dig the song, I confess. In fact, it's the only song on this album that I will totally say that I like. I have no problem saying I like this song. I confess, quite a bit.
You know, that's a common thing I've actually heard from people is that there are a lot of Kiss fans, like I said, this is the most divisive album in the catalog. It's a love it or hate it thing. Most people I found have one track they really like from this album. Even the detractors will say, all right, that album's a piece of shit, but yeah, so-and-so is a good song. And so it's interesting to hear you say that because that sort of validates what I've heard from a lot of other people. But what's interesting is it's never really the same song. I always hear I've heard people say Seduction of the Innocent is the only good song on that album. You're a fucking weirdo, but all right. So for me, if this is ripping off anything, it's Kiss ripping off themselves from The Elder. Their weird progressive rock Final Fantasy swords and wizards concept album where the verses, I've heard a lot of people make comparisons to The Elder. Gene is singing in a style that's similar to what he was doing on most of that album. But as a guy who really likes The Elder, I dig this tune too. I think it's great. I think actually, ironically, I'm not as into the chorus as probably Joe is. And even though I like the song a lot, I think the chorus is the weakest part of the song. I like the bridge. I like the verses. I think, the playing's really great, but the chorus felt a little bit out of place musically. But it's the situation where I've grown to love it and accept it. Even though it feels awkward to me, it's still enjoyable. And I, as someone who's also a big Alice Cooper fan, and also I think it's probably safe to say I probably listen to more Alice Cooper than you, Steve.
Probably, but I listen to a lot of 90s Alice Cooper specifically.
Yeah, and look, I love Alice Cooper. I was jamming to the Brutal Planet album the other day.
Nice.
But Last Temptation, honestly, is one of my weaker Alice Cooper albums, where it's yes, I get that you found Jesus. Could you write better songs about it, though?
Oh, man, I love that album.
Some great songs on there. I mean, there's some great songs like, Sideshow and Lost in America and stuff. So I'm not saying it's a bad album. I don't think he's done a bad album necessarily. But I don't think this is derivative of Alice Cooper. Unless you, in the sense, consider it like Bob Ezranisms to be an Alice Cooper thing, where I guess Gene and Paul had a back and forth debate about this song. And Gene said, if Bob was producing this album, you'd be fine with it. Mm-hmm. And so he was, envisioning a Bob Ezrin style thing. And so you're probably thinking of Bob Ezrin's touches to Alice Cooper. But also he had those same touches to Kiss because I'm mentioning The Elder, also Bob Ezrin production. So this is Gene doing an Ezrin style song. So really, this is just like a cut from The Wall, dude. You should love it.
You keep on comparing things to The Wall just because Bob Ezrin is tangentially involved. And, no?
It's like the White Album, dude.
Oh, I was about to grab the chair drop, but then I realized that's the wrong reference for that. Anyway.
I put this one at number 4. I think this is a good song. This is where the good songs end on my list. I think the top 4 are pretty good songs. And the last minute and a half of this thing is awesome. That whole guitar centric solo. I love the tune of the guitar and the chug, and I think this is a good song. And I think the first half of it is kind of like whatever, but that last minute and a half of the song, I was in, man. It was great. It's not my favorite one on the album, but I do think it's got its solid points. And that like whole guitar section was good. And it was kind of a surprise, honestly. Like on this album, we're like, what the fuck? There's something good here, you know? But I was like, I dug it. I think this is a decent song. So it is kind of sad that it's this far down, but I guess I put it at number 4. It's not that much further than where I stuck it, but yeah, it's good. It's good.
I would say the playing on this album is actually very strong overall, where there might be very legitimate critiques with the songwriting, but I think the band, in terms of playing, I think they're firing on all cylinders. I think Bruce is a fantastic guitar player, and I think he really shines on this album. I like Eric's drumming quite a bit, but I understand that Joe thinks it's the wrong choice artistically, but I think he's playing very well. And I think, Gene and Paul are both delivering their respective parts well as well. Well. Yeah, any other comments on I Confess before we move on?
Had I realized it was actually a Simmons song, I probably would have rated it higher.
So,
but going off half-cocked is how I roll with this podcast. So,
tis a mighty bottle of puke.
All right. Well, next up on the list we have Rain. I freaking love this song. I think that is a badass heavy riff. I love the guitar tone. It's just, I think because part of the reason I love this is because it's so heavy for Kiss. And so it's nice to hear them get this heavy. And it's, it's definitely weird. The first time you listen to the album, you're used to happy, believe in yourself Paul Stanley doing this kind of rhythm guitar riff. But it's cool because it's so different. And so maybe part of the appeal is that it's a change of pace from what I've heard before as a Kiss fan. But I think sincerely, I love that riff. I think it's a catchy riff. I think the song itself is catchy. I think there's a really great bridge in the song, and I think Paul Stanley's vocal is just top notch. I think Paul Stanley is one of the best rock vocalists. I think this is still him singing very well, still prime Paul Stanley, and I just think the combination of those riffs and that great vocal make this song really shine for me. So tell me why I'm full of shit, guys.
Well, you're full of shit because you say you don't like grunge, but this is an Alice in Chains song. This is Rain When I Die.
I've listened to that. That is I think a very different song musically than this.
Well, right, one of them's good. I would agree there. I guess totally it's slightly different, but it starts off the same. He has that. He's really going for the Alice in Chains sound with his voice, but it's just more boring and it sounds shittier to me. Like I don't know how, but it does, and that's where I'm at with Rain. It's like a Rain where it's Rain When I Die by Alice in Chains, just worse.
Well, I guess Rain When I Die, because I've heard a number of people make that comparison. I think the production sound is similar, but I think rhythmically they're very different. Melodically they're very different. And so you saying that you think this song is shit and that song is great makes sense because they're very different. They're, I don't think, very close, and except in terms of just production value. But I think what this song does for me that song doesn't is, like, I'm locked into the groove of this one. And I think that Paul Stanley as a vocalist is more appealing to me because he has that expansive range. Like, I think his more expansive range works for me personally, and I enjoy what he does on this cut.
I think that for a rip-off song, it's okay. It is totally Alice in Chains, like, to the T. So I agree with Schweiss here. I think the chorus is kind of mediocre, but catchy-ish is what I wrote down. okay overall. It's really 90s, really 90s. I could tell you the month. It does to me. I wrote this note down when it came to Rain. Now, I listened to these songs in order and wrote these notes down. It says, sounds like a filler song on an album from a one-hit wonder band. Just like a grunge one. And then...
a grunge hit wonder, as it were.
Yeah, grunge hit wonder. I hate the reverb on his vocals. It's like too, like, I'm in a closet kind of a sound to it. I don't really care for that, but... If that was kind of changed around, it'd be more okay. I kind of put this song in the middle just because I love Alice in Chains, and even an Alice in Chains ripoff I'll kind of like. So I like that guitar work and stuff, and like the odd time signature and everything. But I don't know. I'm kind of lukewarm on this one overall.
When this one came up, I just kind of felt condescended to. Like, it started playing, I was like, all right, I'm into this guitar tone, but, like, this isn't a Kiss song. This is Kiss trying to pander to what was happening in the 90s. And as somebody who sort of listened to that music, I feel a little insulted.
So here's a question. If you didn't know this was a Kiss song and you just heard it, what would you think of it?
Probably would have thought it was better, yeah.
So how much of this is bias against the band for doing it rather than just judging, like, the end product?
I mean, selling out is not cool. Although it is, as we discussed in earlier episodes,
right.
Kiss's entire modus operandi.
So really, this is just Kiss having their most integrity possible. Because they've never had an agenda other than capitalism.
It's really fundamentally dishonest to be like, by having the least integrity, they had the most integrity.
But, I mean, for me, I think that might be one of the reasons why I like the weirder Kiss albums, is I'm not judging them as, is this Kiss doing what Kiss is supposed to be doing? I'm just judging, do I like the songs I'm listening to? Because my favorite band is the Beatles, and they go all over the place musically. Yeah. You listen to the White Album, the songs sound drastically different from each other. You've got Helter Skelter, which is like the first metal song, and you've got Good Night, which is this beautiful orchestral piece. You've got all these different moods and vibes. Obla Di, Obla Da has like some reggae-isms. And so, for me, I'm just judging as like, do I enjoy what I'm listening to? And I'm not saying, oh, this doesn't sound like Detroit Rock City, so it sucks. Or, that's why I like the weird jazz album and the weird progressive rock album and this album, where I'm not judging it as a Kiss song. I'm not judging it as a grunge song. I'm just judging it as a song that I like. And I think just that riff and that cool time signature, it grabs me right away. I like that. I think the guitar tone sounds the best on this track out of every track on the album. I think it's a really beefy tone. And ordinarily I don't like that kind of tone, but it works with the riff. Just everything flicks together for me personally, where, yes, they're obviously trying to play to the times and make something that will be popular in the era they're doing stuff in. But I sincerely enjoy it, and I think there are a lot of songs in the Kiss catalog where if someone heard them and didn't realize they were Kiss, would like it. And in high school, this would actually be a thing I would do. I would have someone listen to a song, and they'd be like, wow, that's really good. I'd have them listen to, like, Hard Luck Woman, which is like this pretty acoustic ballad. And then they'd find out it's Kiss. Oh, actually, it's a piece of shit. So when people just judge it with their ears and not with their preconceived notions about what the band is and what to expect, I found that there are a lot of Kiss songs that might not sound like their normal stuff that people like.
Yeah, this one, my counter to that is, one, I don't like Kiss and don't listen to Kiss. Two, if I heard this without knowing it was Kiss or knowing it was anyone, I would assume it was like a garage first, like they were like conceiving. This is like the moment of conception for the song Rain When I Die. Like they had something they were like piddling around with. They're just like, and they were like coming up with a little bit. That's what I would assume this was. It's not a bad song though. It's just not their song. That's why I put it at number 8 personally. I don't think it's bad necessarily. I think there's a middle range here that's number 5 through number 9, number 10 maybe, that's like kind of interchangeably okay. and then the last 2 are really bad, and the first 4 are actually pretty good.
And look, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case with you, saying that you have that preconceived bias. I'm saying I've noticed it with a lot of people, and I think Steve is openly admitting to having that bias on this episode.
Yeah.
It's true.
I think with the whole, like, 90s grunge movement, there was sort of this, I mean, obviously some bands like Alice in Chains sort of demonstrate this to be false, but there was this...
And Pearl Jam.
This sense of, like, authenticity being important that, you know, it got from the punk influences.
But the thing is, I think that's absolute bullshit because of how many of them started as glam bands.
I think
they sold, like Pearl Jam sold out, Alice in Chains sold out, Pantera sold out. They were a bunch of glam bands, and then they switched tides because they saw something else was becoming popular. So I don't think that authenticity argument, I think that is absolute bullshit. And that's not to say that those bands didn't make music that, you know, I might not be into, but I'm not going to say that the music is necessarily bad. And I think, you know, if you want to argue that Nirvana is authentic, I'll give you that. But a lot of those bands, the fact that so many of them were 80s hair bands and then changed tides to grunge, the authenticity argument that people say that 90s music is more artistically pure, absolute fucking bullshit.
See, the trick is the ones that you're citing as the bands that sold out and switched from hair metal are mostly the ones that I don't particularly care for. I don't really like Alice in Chains.
But I'm saying there's this entire, like, mentality that a lot of 90s kids have. And I think you would agree with this, that they think that the music of, you know, the past decades, like the 80s, was corporate-produced bullshit, and that their music in the 90s was, like, true high art. When it is, you know, the same thing. In the 80s, those bands were just kids, you know, forming bands together, trying to make it, getting record deals, and getting lucky. And, you know, it's the same thing with a lot of those grunge bands. The difference is a lot of those grunge bands started as 80s bands that were too shitty to get record deals, and then they switched over to a new genre that they were chasing trends, but they're hailed as great artists.
Well, I don't know if they were chasing trends. I mean, the reason why Alice in Chains is one of the big 4 of grunge is because they were, like, there in the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
And, I mean, and another reason is because they're highly influential and they're one of the biggest ones. So you have to be big, and you have to be around in the beginning. I mean, he did have his... Lane Staley did have his little bullshit Alice in Chains glam band that had like 1 EP or whatever, but he was the only one from that band that went into Alice in Chains. So it's I don't know, it's kind of like I'm not really, I guess, 100% sure when the grunge started, but I know they were around, like, in the beginning.
I'm not saying that they weren't.
Certainly.
What sort of happened was, you know, a lot of the Seattle bands were coming up with the same sound around the same time because those bands were starting to become popular on the Seattle scene. So as those bands with the alt-rock sound started to attract big crowds, other bands were like, oh shoot, we need to adjust and switch to a sound that sounds more like that band because they're getting bigger crowds than us. Like, I mean, Pearl Jam was such a fucking glam band, and it's such a ridiculous troll for me when, you know, people who shit on the glam bands of the 80s are listening to these bands that started off as, like, glam bands that are so shitty I won't even listen to them.
Mm.
Well, I mean, they just got better, is all. I don't know if that's like a...
I agree with Schweiss. They just got better.
No, I mean, they got better, but I think the argument that one era is more artistically pure than the other, I think, is an unfair argument. I think there is validity to both decades artistically. I vastly prefer the music of the 80s, but to say that decade they weren't true artists, and in the 90s they are true artists, when there's a very strong argument for selling out, I think is a dumb bullshit argument, and it should just be judged more based upon the individual music you're listening to rather than, oh, well, these guys are real artists and these guys are hacks. That's my personal opinion. It's a very hot take in the rock community where most people don't agree with me. To me, it feels like I'm taking crazy pills when people don't respect that argument. Because, like, seriously? It's okay when your bands sell out, but not when my bands sell out? Fine, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is I don't think anyone... I don't think... Okay, so with Nirvana, I don't really think Kurt Cobain is that great of a musician, to be completely honest. I think I think his singing voice is kind of meh. His guitar isn't super impressive. So I don't know who in the hell would say that like 90s grunge is more artistically pure than like 80s thrash metal. Like there's no way. Like it's just that I like grunge, but like my god, like listening to Nirvana live is painful sometimes. Like it's just the sound of his voice that bothers me. But am I crazy here? Like Nirvana is huge, but I wouldn't say they're pure. I'd say they're like punk, where they're just, I'll just record it in 2 takes. Like screw it, whatever. Like I don't think punk is pure either. I think punk is pure garbage for the most part. It has some great stuff with the speed, but like there's no. To me, there's no art there because there's almost no desire to have art. It's their point is to sound like shit,
which I think is art.
I think that there is a validity to punk because a lot of punk is more. It's meant to be emotionally responsive. It's meant to capture raw emotion, and the sloppiness of punk is to sort of enhance the sloppiness of the emotion, which initially I didn't like, and I thought just punk bands sound like shit, and it definitely took me a while to appreciate that. And I think Nirvana is very much a punk band where it is about the raw emotion rather than necessarily playing very well. And for me, it still doesn't succeed. I don't enjoy listening to Nirvana, but a lot of people do. Tangents. Tangents, I think that this song is great. Not comparing it to anything else. I've heard the Alice in Chains song. I've listened to it. I think they are not musical ripoffs. I don't think it's a musical ripoff. I think it has it has Rain in the title. And if it didn't have Rain in the title, I don't think it would click with people as being a ripoff because I think the rhythms are so drastically different and the melodies are so drastically different. Like, they're not the same thing.
All right, man. All right. Can't agree.
All right, so next up on the list.
Och, 'tis a mighty pottle of puke.
All right, so next up on the list, we have the only song sung by Bruce Kulick in the Kiss catalog. We have I Walk Alone next on the list. So, I freaking love this song. I think this is a powerful anthem. I think that, Bruce is obviously, he's a weaker singer than Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, who have been both, singing on albums for 20 years at this point. This is his first time doing a lead vocal. So he's mainly a guitar player, and this is him coming into his own as a vocalist. But I think the emotion and sincerity from the song really come out. It became a kind of poetic song to close out the album because this was his last album with the band. And then he went on to do things musically that were very similar to this album. So it became prophetic in a lot of ways, where it predicted his future of walking away from Kiss, doing his own thing that continued the legacy of this album. And, as far as the members of Kiss I've met, he's easily the nicest. He's easily the coolest dude to chat with. Nice guy, great player. And so because I'm feeling that emotion from this piece, because there's that excitement of hearing him sing on a Kiss record, the fact that he has his own song in the catalog, but with these great, empowering lyrics, after a very, dreary album, a very depressing album, to end on a positive note, with also some really great playing. The backwards guitar playing, the backwards drum fills on this song. It's so creative musically, and I think it's a catchy song. Obviously, there's not as much power coming from the vocal, so it might not have as much punch as if Gene or Paul sang it, but I think that emotion, which we were just talking about with punk, comes across on this track for me, and I sincerely love this track, and it's one of my favorites.
I put it as number 9. My only comment was the song glitched out about halfway through. Because it has that weird, glitch sound, and then it, carries on the rest of the song. I don't know. I think it was kind of too long, and it just didn't really resonate with me. It's not terrible, but I don't know. I didn't have the same kind of feeling as I did with the I'll Be There as far as, the true, sincerity and the true emotion with the song, personally. And maybe it's just because I don't have as much stake in the song as you do. I've never met any of these people. Dave Mustaine is really the only, pal I have in in the metal industry. So I mean, it's this one's it was fine. Like I don't know. It's not one I would listen to again. There are only 4 songs that I would ever consider listening to again, and this isn't one of them. It just didn't quite do it for me.
I like the cool harmonic like effect thingy that's going through the song. There's some forced rhymes in the lyrics, and it feels like I thought it was the same singer. So what I put was, this is too low of a register for his voice. I didn't realize it was just like a different guy that didn't sing as well. So it was like, he sounds uncomfortable. Is honestly like how it sounded to me vocally. But what kind of like put it kind of towards the middle for me was that it's more like musically experimental, and it's a lot more interesting than what most of the tracks on this album have going for it. They're all just like Alice in Chains ripoffs mostly. So like this one felt like a breath of fresh air. It's a weird album closer though, right? It's just weird. So that's the order. If I listen to the album in the correct order, this is the closer.
Yeah, yes, it's the closer of the album. It's the closer of the non-makeup era and the closer of Bruce's tenure in Kiss, where I think he'd been with the band like 10 years at that point, maybe even like 15 years. So he'd been with the band a while, and so like to me, this is just a great swan song for Bruce, and the fact that he plays it live solo and played it with Union afterwards, and it became a staple of their set. Just, this is the one that I think I have the most advantage of being a longtime Kiss fan appreciating.
I thought you were supposed to appreciate the song in a vacuum, Greg.
Look, I appreciate it in a vacuum when I first heard it, because it's a good Believe in Yourself shonen anthem, which I'm all about. But, I'm sensing the emotional sincerity from it. And, yes, he's shy. It's his first time on the mic, but just that sincerity and just that feeling of real emotion, it goes a long way for me on this track, and it absolutely succeeds. I've met a lot of Kiss fans, even Kiss fans who like this album, who are pretty lukewarm on this song, and so I understand that it's a divisive song on a divisive album, but I think just the sincerity works for me. I totally dig it. So Steve, as someone who thinks this is a pretty insincere album, how do you feel about this track?
I thought that the production choices made this one a little bit more interesting. I think I put it 4th. Otherwise, it was largely a forgettable song. Yeah, it was okay. This was, yeah, not really much to say about this one. Like we're starting to get to the songs that like I don't hate.
Yeah, I agreed.
All right, well,
How many fucking albums do these people have, by the way? I'm going through like the discography, and it's fucking good God.
It's a ton.
They've been around since 1974. They probably should have more albums than they do.
I guess that's true, yeah. But shit, man, I'm like, when does the Unmasked era end? I'm just clicking through the discography on Wiki, and I'm like, Jesus.
Ends with this one.
When did it begin? Is what I was looking for, I guess. That's crazy.
That's Lick It Up is the first non-makeup album.
Oh, okay. I'll scroll through the first 60 and get to that one.
Yeah, Steve has gone through all of these albums in order.
Your scroll wheel is super loud.
There you go. Good cameo for the scroll wheel. It doesn't give enough.
It doesn't get enough love. All right, lads. Well, we're in the top 3. Next up on the list, we have Steve's favorite song from the album.
I wouldn't call it favorite.
Well, his least hated song from the album.
Yeah.
Next up on the list, we have Childhood's End. So first off, Steve, the Regdar Suite is better.
Yeah, this is probably the 3rd best song called Childhood's End.
Yeah, your 2 songs called Childhood's End, part 1 and 2, are better than this Kiss song.
Thank you.
So I will concede that, but also that's one of the best albums I've ever heard in my entire life. So, spoiler alert, is great. But with this track, this was a song that Gene Simmons wrote about Kurt Cobain, and he came up with the scenario like, what if Kurt Cobain and I were friends? How would I feel after hearing that he died?
Are you telling me this is fan fiction?
This is Gene Simmons fan fiction. And it doesn't.
We were friends and we both were jealous of Alice in Chains.
So yeah, this is Gene Simmons fan fiction, wondering what it would be like to be friends with Kurt Cobain, and then being sad that he died.
I feel like Kurt Cobain wouldn't want to hang out with Gene because he wouldn't want to shoot up with him.
That's true, because Gene is straight edge, so he's like, "What? No, don't shoot up, Kurt. Let's just talk about how great groupies are instead."
It's like, come on, let's just pass out in the bathroom, man.
And Kurt's just like, I'm married to Courtney Love and have scoliosis.
She's gonna kill me, man. I know it. I could see it in her eyes, man. That's why I gotta get high.
But yeah, I actually ranked this song the lowest of the panelists. I think it's a good song, but I think the chorus, it's the melody choices make it less catchy than I think it should be. I think this song would have been probably one of the singles on the album, based upon everything I've read. And I think it's a good song. I mean, it doesn't get much more 90s than singing about Kurt Cobain's suicide. Like, that is really freaking 90s.
It's very 90s.
But once again, this is an album where, in interviews, Paul Stanley shits all over this album. It's like, it fucking sucks. Don't listen to it. It's the worst thing we've done. And then Gene is super proud of it. And he's like, it's one of the best things I've done. I'm so proud of it. So, once again, sincerity from Gene Simmons, which is a weird thing in the Kiss catalog, as Steve can attest to.
Right?
But
this song's not about his dick at all.
Yeah, there's not a single song about Gene's dick on this album.
Unless the shotgun is a metaphor for Gene's dick?
So Kurt Cobain died from swallowing too much of Gene Simmons' cum?
He couldn't handle it.
I mean,
his love is larger than life.
Have you read fan fiction before, Greg? That's how these things go. This is a Kurt Cobain empreg.
Gross. Super sexy swinging fan fiction.
This brings back a lot of memories.
Keep them to yourself, Pops.
That's why I quit that show.
Yeah, my stomach's churning right now.
Childhood's End. Didn't know this was the different singer. I'm guessing Paul Stanley's the good singer in the band.
Yes.
His voice. Look, I put this as number 4, so I actually put it like it's like one of the decent ones. His voice sounds uncomfortable, but the songwriting is better than Hate or Rain or Master and Slave. And I think he needed to sing in a higher register. And that's really what I put there, because I thought the song was all right. It's just like the performance of it I thought was a little weak. It could have been improved.
Yeah, this is more Alice in Chains for me, but it's like less of a direct ripoff. So it's almost more they wanted to be stylistically like the grunge. Like this is kind of what they wanted, I think, with this song, because it has its own identity. It doesn't sound just like Audio Sex type thing in Chains. This has its own uniqueness to it, and I feel like the rest of the album kind of lacks that, even though I did put this one at number 5. So I mean, it is unique, but I still didn't love it. I kind of agree with Greg about the chorus. It's not super strong, but I think overall this is an okay song. This is one that's I wouldn't like cringe at for me, and I put it as number 5. So that's all I have for Childhood's End. It's decent. I like that they kind of borrowed from the grunge movement and they sort of made their own thing, and I think this song sort of captures what they wanted to capture with the rest of the album. It didn't quite do for me.
Yeah, in terms of vocalists, Gene and Paul approach things very, very differently as singers. Gene is tends to go for more of like a growl, raspy, sort of husky thing, and Paul Stanley tends to do the more clean, higher pitched vocals. I think with different EQ, I think just like the fact that the guitars are so low, such low sounding instruments, and they're also singing in that low register. It's they're occupying too much of the same frequencies and kind of blending together too much and kind of making it a less catchy experience overall. So, but I think, I think that's a problem for the entire album, which I still like the album, but I think that's I think that's a mixed issue that I think could have could have been fixed with, tweaking the knobs and all that good stuff. But I still enjoy the song. This one is just, it's weird for me because it's Kurt Cobain fan fiction written by Gene Simmons.
Kurt Cobain and Preg fan fiction.
And also, given that the guys in Nirvana were Kiss fans, it's so weird, Kiss examining their fans this way throughout this album, where just they're, it's a really bizarre concept for them to comment on their fans, both, musically and lyrically. Like, the followers of Kiss, and then Kiss answering the followers. It's a weird thing that you don't really come across too often in music, where someone looks at someone that was influenced by them and I'm going to try to do what my influencees are doing. It's a bizarre thing. It is really weird, and kind of makes it a fascinating and unique album in a lot of ways.
So it occurs to me, the school that Gene was hanging around outside of was Kurt Cobain's?
In Christine 16?
Right? Kurt 16!
So,
I mean, that's the age difference, right?
Do you have any comments on the song, Steve?
I'm sorry, I'm just really into this fan fiction thing. I like the riff. This one, I did the original ranking last week, and then I reconsidered my ranking today when I listened to it again, or glossed over it again, just because so much of this was I do not enjoy listening to this. But this one went from third place to first place in that time. Just I think that riff is hooky enough to really move it up a couple of places. There's a lot more melodic than the other ones.
Guys, ready to move on to the next one?
Let's do it. Yeah. Number 2.
All right, so coming up as the second best song on this great, fantastic album, we've got Hate next on the list.
God, what is wrong with you people? Oh, no.
All right, so Caleb, this is your number 1.
Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of liked it. I like the guitar riffs in it. I enjoy the chorus. It kind of breaks everything that I have in my mind about Kiss. When I listened to it, I was like, oh, this doesn't sound like what I imagined Kiss would sound like at all. Little did I know the rest of the album was going to follow suit with that. But I like the breakdown, the build up. I don't know. I just like the song. I don't know what else to say. It's enjoyable to me. It's another one of those songs that kind of has the sort of the grunge undertones to it, with the anger and just the raw rage that's in the song. And it sounds, I don't know, it almost kind of sounds like another song, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. But I think it's a great song. I think it's the heavy one on the album for me, and not just heavy in the form of the guitar is so down tuned that the strings are barely holding on to the instrument. It's very angry and the most rock song on the album to me, rock/metal. So I like this one. I had a hard time between this one and what I ended up putting as number 2, which is going to be the number 1 on the album. But I liked it. It was off to a good start for me, and then it's derailed immediately upon the next song starting, and I was like, oh, this sounds like that one Alice in Chains song.
I wonder if this album would have done better for the panelists if all the Gene songs were in the front, and then and then Paul Stanley just breaks up that momentum. I wonder.
Kinda, yeah. I don't know. I mean, the first 4 songs I thought were okay, I guess. At first I was thinking wow, the first 4 are going to be the best 4, and then I was like, no. But yeah, I like this one. I don't know what is your issue with it, Joe? Why do you hate this one?
I did not like it the entire time. I don't know. I think the guitar riff is fine. And I was thinking, did they just hire a different guitarist for Kiss during this era? I guess I don't really know because I don't fucking know Kiss at all. But I was like, all right, cool. The southern metal kind of riff thing was fine. had a cool feedbacky intro to start the album on, but the lyrics to me sounded forced. And then because this was my first, this is the song hitting me in the face, right? I was like, this sounds like Shinedown. Well,
that's a good point.
It sounds like Shinedown or Alice in Chains is what I put. I don't like that noise guitar solo. I don't like Metallica does that in the 90s too, where they're just like, we'll do a solo, but it's going to be noisy and shitty midway through. And I don't really love that kind of solo style, and it's not a very catchy song at all, and immediately thought the album was dull. So, Hate, I did not think was a good album opener, and I just don't really care for the song that much. So
Hate, not loved.
Even though it is heavy, it's look. Here's the thing, Greg. You asked a question earlier, and you guys were talking about this about whether or not if you didn't know this was Kiss, how would you feel about it? And I would feel like, oh, this sounds like one of the bands that was just really mediocre in the early 90s that was thrown away later on because they were just mediocre the whole time. They didn't get past that. It's like a Seether or something like that. It's just like they never hit a high enough high to be interesting, and all their songs sound the same.
And you know
that's
what?
I honestly, that's the feel I get. It's like they're not good enough to be one of the good grunge bands, so they're just kind of down there.
And I think I respect that because I feel that's a very honest take. But for me, this song just completely works. So it is the only Kiss song in the catalog to mention Billy Corgan. The intro mentions Billy Corgan and just reverses his name on the tape back. So, and I think the solo is a very Billy Corgan kind of noise solo. But I think this song works for me for a lot of reasons. I think it's a great riff. I've heard Kiss tribute bands do this live, and it fucking smokes live. Bruce Kulick, who was the guitar player on this album and was the guitar player since 1984. So he'd been with the band a while at this point. He said he doesn't like the mix of this song. He said this is one of the songs where the original mix, he said, sounded more like a Kiss song, and that Toby Wright went too far with the mix and made it sound too much like Alice in Chains. So I really do wonder how much a different mix would have affected the vibe of this album, because this does sound exactly like Alice in Chains production wise, and so maybe if the
vocals further back than in the album.
So it's possible that with different production we might not have even noticed the Alice in Chains isms of the writing, where just production does make a big difference in the the listener's finished product. But this song is the height of Gene Simmons' Angry at God. And the song...
And Billy Corgan, apparently.
No, he's fine. No, they did that as a cool tip of the hat to Billy Corgan, is what I heard. There's because Gene was a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan. It's like, you know what, I just want to do
And Billy was also very angry at God in the 90s.
Yeah. But this song, what I've heard Gene say about it is that his idea of the song was talking with... He said his idea for the song lyrically was, if man is created in the image of God and man is violent and selfish and brutal, what does that say about God? Is there truly a good and just God? And I don't know if it completely comes off in the lyrics, but I sense that was where he was at in an emotional place when he wrote it, and just being really still upset about Eric's death. And so, the sincerity I feel from it, the heaviness of the riff, it works for me, and I think it's a great album opener. It's less catchy than Unholy off the previous album, which is, kind of a sister song to this in a way, where Unholy and Thou Shalt Not felt like precursors to this album, but were much catchier. This is just heavier, angrier, not as catchy, but it still works for me because I enjoy the lyrics, I enjoy the sincere emotion, and I think that's a bitchin' riff. I dig that riff.
Yeah, agreed.
so he mentioned Billy Corgan. He said this was like he's angry at God. Would you say he's also lonely? So loneliness is emptiness, and emptiness is cleanliness, and cleanliness is godliness, and God is empty, just like me.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
You gotta be careful. That's over half of that song. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, now we gotta pay licensing fees for this episode.
Right? Damn it.
Yeah, he's gonna get half a cent every time somebody listens to it.
So,
I actually dig that.
It's actually a good song, by the way, and it's only 2.5 minutes long.
So ever since my Hey Jude comment, I've been like giving Greg plenty of time to bust out hot takes to really annoy you two, Joe and Caleb. But I figure, so when this song started out, I started listening to it and said, oh, okay, so is this like this entire album just gonna be Kiss attempting to be Alice in Chains? Because I'm not super into that, but they're also definitely better at it than Alice in Chains, because Alice in Chains isn't very good.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Alice in Chains is the best grunge band ever, man. And you know why? It's because they're not really a grunge band. They're just pretending to be grunge. They're a metal band with a grungy-sounding lead singer. How can you not love Man in the Box or Rooster or Rain When I Die?
I haven't actually heard Rain When I Die, but mostly their harmony choices. The harmony choices and the production of their recordings just really grates on me.
And I mean, those are the same harmony choices on this album. Like, Toby Wright has said he tried to make the harmonies as uncomfortable as possible. I'm like, I
don't think it doesn't stick out as much in this as it does in Alice in Chains' stuff.
Fuck you guys.
Alice in Chains' inferior songs.
Bullshit. This is a great album. All right, Dirt's amazing.
Dirt the song is 10 times better than anything on this album.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a...
The best album called Dirt would be The Arrogant Wormses.
I can't even argue that because I've never heard that thing. I've never heard those words strung together.
They're a Canadian comedy band, sort of country rockish, Americana-ish.
You know what? Sure. I'm not an Alice in Chains fan. I don't particularly like the songwriting of Alice in Chains. For some reason, I understand that this album working for me doesn't make sense. Like, this is...
Oh, shoot, there's also a Florida Georgia Line song called Dirt. We can probably all agree that that's the best one.
Yeah, probably. I mean, Florida Georgia Line's really catchy. But...
They sure do love their trucks and painted on jeans.
I mean, who doesn't? Man, I don't know. I
feel like Joe and Caleb just left.
Right.
You were just saying such terrible things. We're like, we're done. Boop.
I think this is it's a great song. I think it's badass riffs, heavy, and once again, the sincere emotion I feel from the track works for me.
All right.
All right, but before we get to the number one song, let's go through the ranking from the bottom to the top. In the Mirror, In My Head, Seduction of the Innocent, I Will Be There, It Never Goes Away, Master and Slave, I Confess, Rain, I Walk Alone, Childhood's End, Hate. But the best song on Carnival of Souls, according to this panel, we've got Jungle coming in at the top of the ranking. The single off the album. Who'da thunk the single would be the one most liked overall by a group of people?
Yeah. See, this is the one I bumped down from first place to third when I re-listened today.
Yeah, I bumped it down from first to second, just because of the raw emotion and like the fucking anger from the first song. I was like, I can get behind that because that's how I feel after the rest of the CD.
You hate the rest of it.
I will say, Jungle is a decent sequel to Welcome to the Jungle, which is obviously the better song. And it's also a pretty decent prequel to the Scorpions song, The Zoo. We got Welcome to the Jungle.
The Zoo came out before both of those, right?
I know. Right.
Welcome to the Jungle is like a prequel to Zoo.
Yeah. It's
okay, you're talking about like narrative-wise. Got it.
Narrative-wise, you're coming into the jungle, they're like, we've got fun and games, we've got everything you want, blah, blah, blah.
Etc.
In the Jungle, which is this song, I suppose we could do, after that, the Run Through the Jungle song from Creedence Clearwater Revival. Get out of the jungle, Amazing song. And then The Zoo, which is, of course, the years down the road Godfather 3 sequel where they take the animals from the jungle and they place them in the zoo. Also an amazing song.
And then
like
Madagascar comes next.
And then what?
Madagascar, the children's film. That's next, right?
Oh, yeah. And then we have to do like, I don't know, some song. Oh, we could do Countdown to Extinction from Megadeth. They take the animals from the zoo and they hunt them in like very shitty ways. So it's basically you just killing a caged animal and being proud about it. That's the finale. Great 5 series of songs right there, or 5 or 6. I like the breakdown in the song, and I think the chorus is actually the strongest on the entire album. This is a pretty good song. At first, I was like, "Oh, jungle, Jesus, here we go!" Like it's gonna be a welcome to the jungle. Like this is where they strangely decide to rip off like a whatever the hell you would call Guns N' Roses, just
hair
like
metal.
Hair metal band, the biggest hair metal band.
It's when they try to rip off a slightly different flavor of hair metal than they had previously been doing.
Than they did before. It's like trying to explain to my uncle, no, Johnny Cash's song "Hurt" is a Nine Inch Nails song. He's like, well, why would Johnny Cash cover a Nine Inch Nails song? He's a way bigger artist. I'm like, no, it's because he loves that song. So he covered it, and he took what was once Nine Inch Nails property and made it his own in such a great way that everyone said, no, this is yours now.
Including the guy who wrote it.
Yeah.
Including the guy who wrote it. He's like, well, yeah, theirs is better. Fuck it. Fine. You know what? Theirs is better. And same thing with Rusty Cage. He also did that. So, you know, I don't know. I just dug this song. At first I was like, oh, this is the single. And I listened to it again today, and I was like, you know what? It was hard to choose between Jungle and Hate as far as the top song. I just liked it. I think it's got a great chorus and a really great breakdown in the song, and it's pretty good. This one and the other 3 in my top 4, I think, are songs that I would probably re-listen to occasionally. And I can see why it was the single on the album. I can. It's a weird one to sell the album on because it doesn't really sound like the rest of the album. But it's the one that wouldn't be as confused for Alice in Chains as the rest of the singles could have been to me.
No.
Right. Well, I think this song succeeds because it sounds like Kiss. It still sounds like Kiss in a lot of ways, but it sounds like contemporary Kiss. It sounds like Kiss in the 90s, but it's not completely abandoning their past sound. I think it has, a really good rhythm to it. I think the chorus is very catchy. Lyrically, it's about domestic violence and all kinds of dark shit. But I think it has still a little bit of rock and roll swagger with some of the riffing. And, like I said, the first version of the song I heard was John Corabi singing it in Union live. And so I got used to hearing, like, the really raspy vocal of his performance before hearing the Kiss version. But I think Paul does a great vocal. And this song, like, interestingly enough, this album was essentially just shoved out by the record company because they were pissed off about the bootlegging. And, they begrudgingly put out a single. But the song actually started to take off a little bit on rock radio and charted on rock radio despite no promotion. And I think that speaks to the quality of this song. I think if this had been on a different Kiss album, perhaps Steve might have had a more favorable opinion of it, where he just overall didn't like the album experience, and probably knocked down the song a few points because of it. But I think great vocals. I think the jamming is really good. Like the instrumentation, it's got that really good groove to it. Obviously, it's a little bit long. That it basically just has like a slow jam at the end. But as far as the part of it that would be a pop single, I think works really well. And it is an example of Kiss bridging their old sound with the new sound they were going for on this album. And I think actually being successful.
Yeah, so if you put this song on a different album, trimmed it down to a more reasonable length, and rewrote that riff so that it wasn't quite as reminiscent as of Shine by Collective Soul, Yeah, you'd have a pretty decent
That's
song.
what it was.
It's
God.
Shine.
There we go.
Oh my God, that was it. I have been going through freaking on YouTube. I have just been going through 90s like grunge songs, like just trying to figure out what the fuck song.
That's the trick. Is it's Collective Soul. It's not really a grunge song.
Well, I was looking for a fucking Soundgarden. It's fucking it's Collective Soul. That makes sense.
Yeah, which I think is sort of indicative of what this album does overall. Is that Gene Simmons trying to do grunge sounds like Alice in Chains but better, and Paul Stanley trying to do grunge sounds like Collective Soul but worse.
That's a
Yeah, got it. There we go. The whole time you guys were talking, I was like, what the fuck is
What
that?
song is this?
I know I was thinking the same thing when I was listening to the song before, but now I'm like doubling. I'm like, what the fuck song? How come no one is talking about the fact
what song is that?
exactly the same?
But you know
That's
what?
the trick is Collective Soul
Another
wrote
song.
so many songs that they're one of those bands that's kind of like Kiss, that like you would look through their discography decades later and be like, I saw them a couple years back and was just blown away that almost every song they played, I was like, I remember this song. I thought I only knew like 2 Collective Soul songs.
What I would say,
it's one of those groups.
Yeah.
I think
Thank you.
I'm hearing it in my head, the comparisons.
It's a very similar riff.
Yeah, it is a similar riff, but I think I think it works well actually in both contexts, which is weird that the Collective Soul song is the more like happy, upbeat song, and the Kiss song is the more menacing one.
I mean, have you heard Collective Soul?
I mean, yeah, but like for like just 90s in general, it's weird that like Kiss is the one delivering the angst and the alt rock band is the one being positive.
There were a number of positive alt rock bands.
In general, broad strokes, Steve, would you say that the 80s was more, poppy and happy than the 90s?
I mean, I guess in general, I feel like you're trying to stick the 90s into a weird box that doesn't really apply.
In general, the music of the 90s was heavier and darker than the music of the 80s. Hashtag not all. But painting with broad strokes, I think that is a fair thing to say. But I think this the riff works as sort of a menacing prelude to the chorus, and I think it works very well in the song. And I just, for me, this is a complete success of a song, personally.
Is this song about sex? Someone look up the lyrics.
Wait, hold on. I got
this one, from what I can...
Paul Stanley's dick. Now this girl's gonna get some of his dick.
No, this one just seems to be about struggle in an urban environment. So obviously,
urban jungle, man.
Urban jungle. Domestic violence is obviously a part of this song. So weird, to hear Kiss singing about child abuse. But I don't know. It works for me. The urban strife Kiss. Yeah, I dig it.
Okay.
Is it about domestic violence, or is this kid doing drugs?
No, maybe it's that.
Hold on.
The child.
I think it's only because I only went through just the beginning of the song listening to the lyrics. Here I go, down below, the sun is going down, a jungle comes alive, the beast is waking up, take another life. I thought this was going down on someone.
But you know what? For the average Kiss song, you'd be right. Maybe it would have been a bigger hit if they had, maybe that was the original lyrical intent, and then the producer's like, nah, you gotta make it angsty and shit, bro.
The beast is his penis.
Yeah, that probably...
I thought it was the jungle was, the bush.
Wait, the beast is waking up to take another life? Is he killing people is he gonna kill Kurt Cobain with his penis?
So really, this is just continuing the narrative from Childhood's End. This song continues multiple song narratives. It's part of the Welcome to the Jungle series. It's part of the Childhood's End series. This is a sequel to multiple songs.
This album really is just a concept album about,
Paul Stanley's dick and how this girl's going to get some of his dick.
No, about how Kurt Cobain's going to get some of it.
Some of Kiss's dick, because Kiss is a collective entity, as discussed on past episodes.
Right. Oh, God. I thought it was good. Excuse me. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. It is such a rip-off song. Obviously, couldn't remember the fucking song that it was ripping off. It was like driving me nuts. Kept going for it. Decent chorus melody. It's a lot longer than most of the other songs, so I thought that was pretty epic, and I liked the noise jam. That's later in the piece, so I thought it was all right. I didn't place it that high, but yeah, I liked it. All right.
So now comes the part in the episode where normally we talk about how did everyone feel about the album and were they surprised by the rankings. I don't think I need to really ask everyone that they felt meh to dislike on the album overall. Yeah. As a first Kiss album, most people would say this is absolutely the wrong place to start. This is not indicative of what Kiss sounds like, what Kiss is all about. Steve, as the resident Kiss expert on this episode, how do you feel about this album?
I did not enjoy this album overall. It's so derivative. I did not have a good time.
Now, here's...
When I put together the best of Kiss album that will rank in the last Kiss episode of this podcast, there will not be cuts from this one.
So I have a quick question for you, and I think I've noticed a little bit of a trend. I would say that the Paul songs are the ones that are derivative, and I would say the Gene songs are not. Because for all the Paul songs, I've noticed, oh, this Paul song sounds like Collective Soul, or this sounds like the Rain Alice in Chains song. But for the Gene songs, we said it had an Alice in Chains vibe, but we weren't able to point out specific songs. So I'm going to give some credit to Gene Simmons for just sincerely feeling this musical direction and just going for it.
I think that the problem with this album is that if as you describe it, that Paul wanted to do another more Kiss album and Gene pushed for this sound, Gene pushed for the wrong thing. Because on Revenge, when it was fundamentally a Kiss-sounding album with a couple of Gene grungy Angry at God songs, that worked pretty well. That was a good balance. But this one, where it's the entire band trying to chase that sound, just really doesn't work.
So you're saying the Gene song should stay the same and Paul should just sing about getting his dick wet?
I mean, when you put it that way, maybe not as much. I mean, I probably would have, golly, I don't know, done this one as an EP with half of the Gene songs where he's angry at God and half songs where Paul's doing, Kiss Party and Chase Your Dream songs.
So, but in the past you've complained, Gene doesn't seem to be writing lyrics about things that matter and doesn't seem to be engaged.
No, yeah, it's just too much of it on this one.
This is what you get when you have Gene Simmons caring.
Right. I mean, and there's a couple, in context of a different album, I think a couple of these Gene songs would have been fine, but there's too much of it. Too much of it sandwiched between too much mediocre Paul.
Yeah. This is one of the few Kiss albums where Gene does a better job than Paul Stanley. That is not normally the case for this band. So, Joe, Kaleb, how was your first, Kaleb's first Kiss album, Joe's second. Joe, how does this compare to the first album?
It's not as good as the first album at all. I don't know. That just felt like more pure, raw, young, ready to go talent. And this sounds tired. And even if it wasn't a Kiss album, it would still sound like old hat. So I don't love it. There's good parts to this thing. I love the song I Confess. And I like a few of the other ones, but most of the album, it's potboilery for a grunge band, and for a band that wasn't even a grunge band. It's just sad.
So yeah. As our metal expert, this does not pass your metal litmus test.
It does not. It does not. It's another band has been here before and has done this way better. And they didn't bring their own flavor to it either. It's not like they were the difference between Metallica got really into Alice in Chains too, and you can hear it in their Load and Reload stuff.
Yeah, but it's still there.
They were also Metallica at the same time, and they just added a few weird harmonies every once in a while, and changed up their song structures a little bit. So they were like still themselves, despite having a lot of influence on like newer bands around at the time.
Right. Metallica playing Alice in Chains is still fundamentally Metallica. Kiss playing 80s hair metal is still fundamentally Kiss. Kiss playing Alice in Chains is no longer Kiss.
No. Yeah, they lose whatever they had in the 70s and 80s.
Metallica playing Blink-182 would not be Metallica. Actually, I'm trying to think of what would be a more equivalent time thing. Metallica playing Brand New would be very bad.
Metallica covers a lot of stuff. Like, they have a lot of covers.
Well, yeah, covering and like trying to emulate the sound of is very different, though.
Lose themselves. Metallica always sounds like Metallica, so maybe that's not a good example. But I don't know another band. Maybe I guess you guys are the rock experts here, but like, what's another band that has tried so hard, like despite having like such a big influence and such their own kind of sound? What other band has tried this hard to chase a trend?
A whole bunch. Like
Jay-Z and Beyonce, the Carter's album. They tried to do SoundCloud mumble rap.
I'm going to give you one that was mentioned on this podcast earlier. The Scorpions did a boy band style pop album.
What? That's such a pivot.
It's honestly, I'm the only person I've met on the planet who likes that album.
I mean, that can't be good, but it must be fascinating.
The thing is, like, there are basically a lot of these 70s and 80s bands, when they went to the 90s, did this kind of thing. Think about Rush and Counterparts. They got super grungy. Like, so many bands took their stab at grunge. I would say most bands, most older rock acts, took a stab at the grunge thing. And so it's easier to think of bands that didn't try to change with the 90s than bands that did. Like,
yeah.
As far as bands I can think that didn't change, Cinderella and Firehouse. And that's like it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's the thing with like this album for Kiss. I don't think this was like when I listened to it, I was like, this is the one he's gonna have me listen to first. Like,
yep.
This CD, like, I don't know about this, man. I know it's not really Kiss at all. And I think what happens is, like with the Big Four of thrash with Metallica, when they started moving towards the Black Album, all the other thrash bands kind of like moved into the same thing. They were like, no, let's slow it down. Let's make it more melodic. Let's make it this big thing. And Dave Mustaine especially. Dave Mustaine has like the biggest James Hetfield sniffer on his head possible. He's like, James is going he's going more mainstream. Let's go more mainstream with this next album, guys. Let's knock it out of the park. And like every single time it happens that way. And I think, and I feel like this is one of those interesting situations where everyone kind of did move a little bit more towards the grunge, like Metallica did it, but they were still themselves. And I think the big reason why, in the thrash community at least, Slayer is more revered than Megadeth, even though Megadeth has sold more albums, is because Megadeth went to risk. They went too far. And they sold out like epically. Whereas Slayer's softest album is Seasons in the Abyss, which the beats per minute on War Ensemble is insane. And if that's your slowest album, like, you're a pretty fast motherfucking band. Right? And I think so it's one of those interesting situations where as a band, I like to see bands grow and I like to see them try things like this, but Metallica did it in a way where it was Metallica with a grunge twinge, or a little tweak at the end, and this is like grunge sung by Kiss, and it's not good. They went too far away from, it's not necessarily they went too far away from what they were, it's just they almost aren't capable of doing what they tried to do. And I think most of the tracks on this album kind of show that. Like, they have no idea what they're doing in the grunge genre. They have no clue. It's almost like something they did because it's like, oh, now it's a grunge era. We need to adapt to the grunge,
Too hard in that direction, like too hard. There needed to be like, I don't know. Maybe there was a gradual kind of process here with like the albums previous to this, but man,
the one album prior to this had a couple songs that hinted at this direction, but I think they did a better job of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is considered by many Kiss fans to be one of two albums where they took a really hard pivot and those two albums are generally, this one has a mixed response. Some love it, some hate it, and the other time they did a huge hard pivot. Most Kiss fans really, really hate that album. So, yeah, this is a hard pivot that didn't work for the vast majority of people. It's one of the few Kiss albums to not sell at least 500,000 copies. Basically, every other album in the catalogs at least went gold. This is one of two that didn't. The other one is that other hard pivot album that most Kiss fans hate. So, go figure, most people prefer Kiss to sound like Kiss and not like a grunge band. But, the reason I had you guys on was because I wanted to see, does it pass the metal litmus test? Would this have succeeded with fans of heavier music? And the answer is no, it would not have. The people who liked grunge and liked heavier bands would have recognized this as pandering, and it would not have worked. I sincerely enjoy it, but you guys were talking about it making more sense for Metallica to do grungy stuff. Metallica doing angsty, angry songs in one angsty genre and then moving to another angsty genre isn't that big of a transition as opposed to Kiss, which is singing about partying, believing in yourself, and getting laid. Okay, let's talk about how God is actually evil. That's a hard pivot from my dick is great to, there's really some really big issues with Christian theology we need to discuss, guys.
I mean, there's the one line in there in the I forget which song, but the one right before the song with mirror in the title. And I confess, there's that one line about lines up on a mirror, which is clearly a cocaine reference. So, partying is bad when priests do it.
Well,
but the rest of their discography is about partying.
It's coming from Straight Edge Gene, who doesn't do cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't, but when have they ever condemned drug use in their lyrics?
Off the Elder, which is another album that didn't sell well.
No, it's true.
Every time that Kiss tries to tell their fans what they really think about drugs, it does terribly. And then
whereas Cold Gin,
sung by Straight Edge Gene Simmons, who doesn't drink. So really, Kiss does their best when they lie to their fans about how they really feel. Yeah, guys, alcohol is great. While secretly they're like, man, I hate people who drink. So this is why Kiss shouldn't be honest. You get this album.
There you go.
Well, that's our episode, folks. Joe, Caleb, where can people find you guys on the internet?
At UFF Podcast on Twitter, ultimafinalfantasy.com, nudeclan.net. Those are the shows that we do. Enjoy doing them. Been doing them weekly for quite a while. That's where you can find me.
You can find me at DeGolyer, as well as Ultima Final Fantasy. So if you like Ultima, or if you like Final Fantasy, check out Ultima Final Fantasy. If you like Godzilla, check out the Godzilla podcast. Kalo has a Game of Thrones podcast you should check out as well, since we're gearing up for season 8. Ready?
Oh, of the show, not the podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
And Steve, where can people find us on the internet?
They can find us at lipstickgeneration.com and Lipstick Generation on most other platforms that we are on.
That's our episode. Bye.